Blood soaked into the sand faster than Lillian Pierce could scream. The stagecoach lay shattered behind her, bodies twisted in the wreckage, gunshots still echoing across the desert. She ran, lungs burning, dress torn, as shadows closed in from every direction. This wasn't how refined Eastern ladies were supposed to die, but the West didn't care about her silk gloves or her father's name. It only cared about survival. And right now, survival meant outrunning the men who'd just slaughtered everyone she knew. This is the story of a woman who fell into hell and learned to fight her way out. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The desert had no mercy. Lillian Pierce learned that truth the hard way, choking on dust and terror as she stumbled through sand that grabbed at her boots like hungry hands. Behind her, smoke curled black against the too blue sky, the remains of the stagecoach that was supposed to carry her to a new life. Instead, it had become a coffin for everyone else. Her father's voice haunted her with every ragged breath. California will be different, Lillian. A fresh start. Everything will be fine. Everything was not fine. 2 hours ago, she'd been adjusting her traveling hat, annoyed by the heat and the cramped quarters. The elderly woman beside her had been complaining about her grandson's gambling habits. The banker across from them kept mopping his forehead, muttering about territorial investments. Normal problems, boring problems. Then the first shot cracked through the air. The stagecoach driver's body hit the ground before Lillian even processed what was happening. More gunfire, rapid, methodical, practiced. The banker's chest exploded red. The elderly woman's complaints ended mid-sentence. Lillian had screamed, pressed herself into the corner, watched through the window as men on horseback circled like vultures. 6 of them. Maybe more. Faces covered with bandanas, eyes cold and efficient. This wasn't random. This was execution. When they dragged her out, the only one still breathing, she'd thought about begging, about offering money, jewelry, anything. But the way the leader looked at her, head tilted like she was livestock he was appraising, killed those words in her throat. "Pretty thing," he'd said, voice muffled behind dirty cloth. "Boss might pay extra for this one." That's when pure animal instinct kicked in. She'd never run so hard in her life. Never knew she could. 23 years of proper posture and polite conversation hadn't prepared her for this. For sprinting through hostile terrain with killers at her back. For the way her corset tried to suffocate her. For the absolute certainty that she was going to die out here and nobody would ever find her body. A gunshot kicked up sand 3 feet to her left. Another one whined past her ear. They were playing with her. They could have killed her already. This was sport. Lillian's vision blurred. Heat, tears, exhaustion. Her lungs felt like someone had filled them with broken glass. The horizon shimmered, endless and indifferent. No shelter, no help. Just sand and scrub brush and the sound of horses getting closer. This is it, she thought. This is how I die. Then the world exploded. Not gunfire this time, hoofbeats. Fast and hard, coming from a different direction. Lillian risked a glance back and saw him, a rider in dark clothing, face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, moving like he'd been born on horseback. He had a rifle, and he knew how to use it. The first shot took down the closest pursuer, knocked him clean off his horse. The others scattered, suddenly less confident, returning fire, but their aim was wild, panicked. This wasn't the easy hunt they'd signed up for. The newcomer didn't slow down. He rode straight into their formation, rifle barking again, and another man fell. The remaining riders hesitated, fatal mistake, and that hesitation cost them their advantage. "Get down!" The voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. Lillian dropped without thinking, face first into sand that tasted like copper and death. More gunshots, screaming, the wet thud of bodies hitting ground, then silence, the kind that rings in your ears after violence, heavy and surreal. Hands grabbed her arms, rough but not cruel, and hauled her upright. "You hurt?" Lillian blinked at the man in front of her. Late 30s, maybe 40. Hard face, harder eyes. A sheriff's badge caught the sun on his vest, tarnished and dented like it had seen its share of trouble. I don't... Words wouldn't form properly. Her whole body was shaking. He scanned her quickly, professionally. "No blood. Good. Can you ride?" What? Can you sit on a horse without falling off?" Impatience crept into his tone. Because those gunshots are going to bring more problems, and I'd rather not be here when they arrive. Lillian looked around. 4 bodies. Blood seeping into thirsty sand, horses wandering riderless, the stagecoach still burning in the distance, smoke signal announcing murder to anyone paying attention. The others, she whispered, they're all dead. Yeah. No sympathy in his voice, just fact. You're not. Let's keep it that way. He didn't wait for agreement, just grabbed her waist and lifted her onto his horse like she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her. His arm locked around her middle, impersonal, functional, and then they were moving, fast. The desert blurred. Lillian clung to the saddle horn, her rescuer's chest solid against her back, his breathing steady while hers came in hiccuping gasps. She wanted to ask questions. Who was he? Where were they going? What just happened? But survival instinct kept her quiet. Talk later. Live now. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably less. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into soup. Sweat soaked through Lillian's dress. Her mouth tasted like sand and bile. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the banker's chest exploding, heard the elderly woman's cut-off scream. Finally, the landscape changed. Rocky outcroppings appeared, offering blessed shade. The rider, sheriff she reminded herself, guided his horse into a narrow canyon, then down a path that looked like it hadn't been used in years. When he finally stopped, Lillian nearly fell off. Her legs buckled the second her feet touched ground. She caught herself against a boulder, breathing hard, trying not to vomit. Drink! A canteen appeared in front of her face. She grabbed it with shaking hands, managed 3 swallows before water ran down her chin. It was warm and tasted metallic, but it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever experienced. Slow, the sheriff said. You'll make yourself sick. Lillian lowered the canteen, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Somewhere in the chaos, she'd lost her gloves. Her carefully arranged hair had come completely undone. She probably looked like hell. She definitely felt like it. Thank you. Her voice came out hoarse. You saved my life. Did my job. He was checking his rifle, reloading with practiced efficiency. Didn't even look at her. Your job is to patrol the middle of nowhere? My job is keeping people alive in my territory. He snapped the rifle closed. Sometimes that means riding out to investigate gunfire. Lucky for you. Lucky, Lillian repeated. The word tasted bitter. Everyone else is dead, but I'm lucky. Now he looked at her. Those eyes, gray, like storm clouds, assessed her with an intensity that made her want to step back. You're breathing, he said flatly. That's luckier than they got. It was such a cold response that Lillian actually laughed, sharp, borderline hysterical. She pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to stop it, but the laughter kept coming, tinged with sobs. The sheriff watched this breakdown with the same expression he'd probably use watching weather. When she finally got control of herself, gasping and embarrassed, he just handed her the canteen again. We need to move before dark, he said. Town's 3 hours northwest. You got people waiting for you somewhere? The question hit like a punch. People. Did she have people? Her father was 6 weeks dead. Heart failure, the doctor said, though Lillian suspected it was really debt and shame that killed him. Her mother had been gone since childhood, no siblings. The few friends she'd had back east had slowly disappeared as her family's financial situation deteriorated. The whole reason for this trip, for California, for the West, for any of it, was a letter. A single letter from a man she'd never met, promising employment as a governess for his children, promising a new start, far from the whispers and the creditors. That letter was currently burning in the stagecoach wreckage. No, she said quietly. No people. The sheriff's jaw tightened slightly. What's your name? Lillian. Lillian Pierce. He nodded once, like filing that information away. Caleb Vance, sheriff of Iron Ridge. That's where we're headed. Is it... She hated how small her voice sounded. Is it safe? Safer than here. He moved to his horse, checking the saddle. Town small but stable. Got a boarding house, general store, saloon. You can rest there, figure out your next move. Next move? As if she had any idea what that could be. Lillian looked down at herself. Ruined dress, lost luggage, no money beyond the few coins in her pocket. Everything she'd owned had been on that stagecoach. Every plan, Every hope burned to ash. I don't have anywhere to go, she said, and the admission felt like swallowing glass. Caleb's expression didn't change. One problem at a time. First problem, getting to town before something else tries to kill you. He said it so matter-of-factly that Lillian almost smiled. Almost. They rode again as the sun started its descent, painting the desert in shades of orange and red that would have been beautiful if Lillian's entire body didn't ache. She'd never been on a horse this long. Everything hurt, thighs, back, arms from gripping the saddle, but she didn't complain. Caleb Vance didn't seem like the type who'd appreciate complaints. As they traveled, she studied him from the corner of her eye. He sat the horse like it was an extension of himself, completely comfortable, constantly scanning the horizon. A man used to danger, used to violence, used to saving useless Eastern women who couldn't survive 5 minutes alone, apparently. The thought stung. Lillian had always prided herself on being practical, capable, but out here, she was completely, humiliatingly helpless. How did you know, she asked, breaking the silence. About the attack? Didn't. Was tracking different trouble. Rustlers hitting ranches north of town. Heard the gunfire, came to investigate. Those men, the ones who killed everyone. She swallowed hard. You knew them? Knew of them. Dalton Gang. They've been hitting stages and supply lines for months. Territorial law's been trying to run them down, but they know the terrain too well. And now they'll want revenge for the men you killed. Caleb's silence was answer enough. Lillian felt cold despite the heat. I'm sorry. I've made you a target. Was already a target. Comes with the badge. He shifted slightly in the saddle. They'll think twice before coming into town, though. I've got deputies. We can handle ourselves. The confidence in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it just reminded Lillian how utterly dependent she was on this stranger's protection. When Iron Ridge finally appeared on the horizon, Lillian's first thought was, that's it? She'd expected more. The name suggested something substantial, industrial. What she saw was a collection of rough buildings huddled together like they were trying to stay warm despite the desert heat surrounding them. Main Street, more dirt than street, ran through the center. Maybe 20 buildings total. Saloon, general store. What might have been a church, though the cross on top looked like it was held on with hope and prayer. Everything built from wood that had been bleached gray by sun and wind. This was supposed to be her salvation? Not much to look at, Caleb said, like he'd read her thoughts. But it's honest. People work hard, keep to themselves mostly. Good enough place to catch your breath. He guided the horse down the main street. A few people glanced up, a woman sweeping a porch, a man loading supplies onto a wagon, but nobody seemed particularly surprised to see their sheriff returning with a disheveled stranger. Maybe this happened all the time. Caleb stopped in front of a 2-story building with a hand-painted sign. Boarding house. Mrs. Chen, proprietor. Martha's got rooms, he said, dismounting. Might have one available. Lillian let him help her down. Her legs nearly gave out again, pins and needles shooting through muscles that had been locked in position for hours. Easy. His hand steadied her elbow. You're gonna be sore tomorrow. I'm sore now, Lillian muttered, then flushed, complaining. Exactly what she'd told herself not to do. But Caleb's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Yeah, riding'll do that. He led her inside, into a mercifully cool interior that smelled like soap and coffee. A small woman appeared from a back room. Chinese, probably in her 50s, with sharp eyes that took in Lillian's condition in one sweep. Sheriff? Her voice carried an accent, but her English was crisp. Trouble? Stage massacre. She's the only survivor. Needs a room, some food, probably a stiff drink. Mrs. Chen's expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy. Room 3's open. You got money, girl. The question, practical, necessary, made Lillian want to cry again. No. Everything was... She gestured helplessly. Mrs. Chen looked at Caleb. He sighed, reaching for his pocket. No, Lillian said quickly. I can't. I won't be charity. You planning to sleep outside? Caleb's tone was dry. I can work. I'll work off the debt. She looked at Mrs. Chen. Please, I'm educated. I can read, write, keep accounts. I can clean or help with cooking or yet. Can you actually cook? Mrs. Chen interrupted. Lillian hesitated. I can learn. The older woman studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. Fair enough. Room and board, you work mornings in the kitchen, evenings helping with laundry. We settle accounts weekly. Deal? Relief hit so hard Lillian swayed. Deal. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the laundry. Mrs. Chen gestured toward the stairs. Room 3. I'll bring up water for washing. You look like hell, girl. I feel like hell. Good. Means you're still alive to feel it. The room was small. Bed, washstand, single window overlooking the street. But it was clean and private and safe. When Mrs. Chen left her alone, Lillian sat on the bed and finally let herself fall apart. She cried hard, muffling the sounds in her hands, body shaking with grief and shock and exhausted terror. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw blood, heard screaming, felt the desert trying to swallow her whole. Eventually the tears stopped because there weren't any left. Lillian washed her face with water from the basin, trying to scrub away the day. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a stranger, wild-eyed, pale, hair a disaster. What would her father say if he could see her now? Actually, she knew exactly what he'd say. He'd probably blame himself. Add this disaster to the long list of failures that had eaten him alive. A knock on the door made her jump. It's me, Caleb's voice. Got something for you. Lillian opened the door. He stood there holding a bundle of fabric. Mrs. Chen keeps spare clothes for emergencies, he said. Figured you need them. The dress and undergarments were plain, practical. Nothing like the fine things Lillian had lost. But they were clean and whole, and that was more than she had right now. Thank you, she said quietly. Caleb nodded, already turning to leave. Wait! The word came out before she could stop it. Why did you help me? Really? He paused, looking back. In the dim hallway light, his face was all shadows and hard angles. Because you needed help, he said simply. That's the job. Is that all? Just the job? Something flickered across his expression, too fast to read. What else would it be? A fair question. What did she expect him to say? I don't know, Lillian admitted. Thank you for everything. Get some rest. He started down the hallway, then stopped. Tomorrow, come to the sheriff's office. Need to take your statement about the attack. Might help catch the rest of them. All right. He left without another word. Lillian closed the door, leaning against it, trying to process the last impossible hours. This morning, she'd been worried about making a good impression on her new employer. Tonight, she was homeless, penniless, and traumatized in a town that looked like a strong wind could blow it away. But she was alive. Against all odds, against every expectation, she'd survived. Lillian changed into the borrowed clothes, wincing at every movement. Her body was discovering new ways to hurt. She lay down on the bed, which was harder than she was used to, but felt like heaven anyway, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep should have come easily. Exhaustion pulled at her like gravity. But every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the desert. Running, dying, being saved by a man who looked at her like she was just another problem to solve. Tomorrow, she'd have to figure out what came next. How to survive in a place so foreign, it might as well be another country. How to work off her debts and find some way forward. Tonight, she just had to make it through the dark without screaming. Lillian pulled the thin blanket up to her chin, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Iron Ridge settling into night. Voices from the saloon down the street. Horses. Someone laughing. Normal sounds from a normal evening. Like 6 people hadn't been slaughtered today. Like the world hadn't ended and somehow kept spinning anyway. She must have slept eventually, because the next thing she knew, sunlight was stabbing through the window and someone was pounding on her door. Kitchen duty starts at 6, Mrs. Chen's voice. You're late! Lillian bolted upright, disoriented and aching. Every muscle screamed protest. Coming, she called, stumbling out of bed. The face in the mirror looked marginally better than last night. Still pale, still haunted, but functional. She splashed water on her face, twisted her hair into a rough knot, and headed downstairs. The kitchen was chaos. Mrs. Chen moved through it like a general commanding troops, pointing at pots and pans, firing instructions in rapid Cantonese mixed with English. Two other women worked alongside her, one young, maybe 16, the other middle-aged and tired-looking. You, Mrs. Chen pointed at Lillian. Eggs, crack, beat, don't burn. Can you do that? Yes. Good. 20 portions. Boarders eat at 7. Lillian had never cooked for 20 people in her life. She'd barely cooked for herself. That's what servants were for, back when her family could afford servants. But she'd made a deal. Time to prove she could keep it. The eggs fought her. The first batch burned. Mrs. Chen tisked but didn't yell, just showed her how to adjust the heat. The second batch came out better. By the third, Lillian had something resembling rhythm. The work was mindless, physical, nothing like the genteel activities that were supposed to occupy a lady's time. Her arms ached. The heat from the stove made her sweat, but there was something almost meditative about it. Crack, beat, pour, flip, serve. Simple tasks with clear results. Not bad, Mrs. Chen said when breakfast service ended. You learn quick. The compliment, small as it was, made Lillian's throat tight. Thank you for giving me the chance. Thank me by showing up on time tomorrow. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. Get yourself some breakfast. Then go see the sheriff like he said. The sheriff's office was easy to find. Small building near the center of town. The territorial flag hanging limp in the still air. Lillian hesitated outside, suddenly nervous. Why? He'd already seen her at her absolute worst. What did she have to be nervous about? She pushed through the door. Caleb sat behind a desk covered in papers, hat pushed back, reading something that made his jaw tight. He looked up when she entered, and for a second she saw surprise flicker across his face. Miss Pierce, you said to come by, for the statement. Right. He gestured to a chair. Sit. Lillian sat, smoothing her borrowed dress. In daylight, the office looked even smaller than she'd thought. A couple of cells in the back, rifle rack on the wall. Wanted posters tacked up. One of them showed a face she recognized from yesterday's attack. I need details, Caleb said, pulling out a form. Everything you remember about the attack. Timing, number of men, what they said, anything that might help. So Lillian told him, forced herself to relive it, the sudden violence, the methodical execution, the way they'd pulled her from the stagecoach like she was cargo. She kept her voice steady, factual, even when her hand shook. Caleb wrote it all down, asking occasional questions, his face giving away nothing. When she finished, he set down his pen. The man who pulled you out. Did he say anything else? Mention a name, a place? Lillian thought back, trying to hear past the terror. He said, boss might pay extra for this one. Like they were planning to sell me. Caleb's expression darkened. That tracks. Dalton runs girls across the border. I was hoping he'd moved on from that trade, but apparently not. The casual way he said it, like human trafficking was just another business transaction, made Lillian feel sick. The others, she said quietly. The people who died. Do they have families who should be notified? Already sent word to the territorial marshal's office. They'll handle notifications. He paused. For what it's worth, it was fast. They didn't suffer. It wasn't worth much, but Lillian appreciated the lie anyway. What happens now? She asked. I send this report to the marshal, put out updated descriptions of Dalton and his remaining men, hope someone spots them. He leaned back in his chair. You should stay in town a while, until we're sure they've moved on. I don't have anywhere else to go anyway. Yeah. Something in his tone made her look up. He was studying her with that same assessing gaze from yesterday. About that. Lillian's stomach dropped. What? Caleb stood, moving to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a folder, hesitated, then set it on the desk between them. Your father, he said carefully. Theodore Pierce? Out of Philadelphia? The name hit like a slap. How do you know that? Because 6 months ago, he wrote to me. Caleb opened the folder, revealing papers covered in her father's handwriting. We had business together, business that's now complicated. Lillian stared at the papers. Her father's signature at the bottom, bold and familiar. A sick feeling crawled up her throat. What kind of business? Caleb's jaw worked. He looked like a man about to deliver very bad news. The kind that involves you, he said finally, whether you knew about it or not. The room felt too small suddenly, too hot. I don't understand. Your father owed money, a lot of it, to some very serious people back east. Caleb pulled out another document, this one legal, official, covered in stamps and seals. He reached out to me because we'd done business years ago, mining investments. He was desperate, offered collateral to secure a loan. Lillian's hands went numb. What collateral? Caleb looked her straight in the eye. You. The word hung in the air like smoke. That's not possible, Lillian whispered. He wouldn't. Contract's legal. Signed, witnessed, filed with the territorial court. Caleb pushed the document toward her. Terms are clear. In exchange for settling his debts, you'd marry me. Binding arrangement. No expiration. Lillian grabbed the paper with shaking hands. The word swam, but there it was. Her name, her father's signature, Caleb Vance listed as the contracted party. This is insane, she breathed. You can't sell a person. This is America, it's not slavery. It's a marriage contract. They're legal in the territories under specific circumstances. Your father presented you as willing. I'm not willing. I didn't even know. I'm aware. Caleb's voice stayed level, but she could hear the edge underneath. Your father died before finalizing the transfer. The debt got sold to a collection agency who tracked me down last month asking about the contract. They want it enforced or they want their money. Money I don't have because I gave it all to your father thinking this was settled. Lillian's vision blurred. Her father, the man she'd buried just weeks ago, had sold her, actually sold her like property to cover his failures. How much? Her voice came out broken. Doesn't matter. How much? Caleb sighed. $12,000. Lillian nearly threw up right there on his desk. $12,000. A fortune. More money than she'd ever see in her lifetime. I can't pay that, she whispered. I have nothing. Less than nothing. I know. So what happens? They send me to prison? Work camps? No. Caleb closed the folder. There's a legal path. We fulfill the contract, get married, make it official. That satisfies the creditors. After a period of time, we can file for annulment or divorce. You'd be free. Lillian stared at him. You're saying I should marry you. I'm saying it's an option, probably the only one that doesn't end with both of us ruined. This is insane, she repeated. Marriage isn't a business transaction. Out here, it is half the time. Caleb leaned forward. Look, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to like me. But this solves both our problems. You get legal protection and a place to stay. I get the debt collectors off my back. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. No, he agreed, but it's practical. Lillian stood abruptly, the chair scraping loud against the floor. She needed air. Needed space to think without those gray eyes watching her fall apart. I need time, she said. Don't have much. Creditors want an answer within the week. Then I'll give you one within the week. She walked out before he could respond, out into the brutal sunshine, vision swimming with tears she absolutely refused to shed in front of anyone. Her father had sold her. The thought kept repeating, a nightmare loop. All those years of trying to maintain appearances, of pretending their family wasn't drowning in debt and bad decisions. And this was how it ended. Not with dignity. Not with an honest bankruptcy. With her father selling his daughter like livestock to cover his failures. Lillian walked without direction, ending up at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to empty desert. The same desert that had almost killed her yesterday. The same desert that was starting to feel less hostile than the life waiting back in civilization. She could run. Just walk into that emptiness and keep going until what? Until she collapsed? Until another gang found her? Until she died alone with nothing but pride and anger to keep her warm? That's stupid, she said out loud. Running is stupid. But so was staying. So was agreeing to marry a stranger because her dead father had made promises he had no right to make. Except Caleb had a point, much as she hated to admit it. Marriage would solve the immediate crisis. Give her legal standing, protection, time to figure out a real plan. And he'd mentioned divorce. This didn't have to be permanent, just a transaction, clean and practical. The thought made her feel dirty anyway. You look like you're planning murder or suicide, a voice said behind her. Can't decide which. Lillian turned. A woman stood there, 30s, sun-weathered skin, wearing pants instead of a skirt. She held a bucket of water like it weighed nothing. "Sorry?" Lillian said. "You're the stage survivor, right? Martha told me about you. I'm Sarah. I run the stable." "Lillian." "I know. Small town." Sarah set down the bucket. "You okay? You look like hell." "I feel like hell." "Yeah, I heard about Caleb's little proposal." At Lillian's expression, Sarah laughed, sharp and knowing. "Told you. Small town. Nobody keeps secrets here." "He told people?" "Didn't have to. Martha Chen hears everything, and what she hears everyone knows by lunchtime." Sarah studied her. "For what it's worth, Caleb's not a bad man. Bit cold, bit broken, but honest. Won't beat you or treat you like property." "That's a low bar." "Out here, it's a high one. You'd be surprised how many men don't clear it." Lillian looked back at the desert. "I don't want to get married." "Then don't." "I don't have a choice." "Everyone's got choices. They're just all terrible sometimes." Sarah picked up her bucket again. "You want my advice?" "Not particularly. I'll give it anyway. This place, Iron Ridge, the territories, all of it, it's not like where you're from. Rules are different. Life's different. You can fight that and make yourself miserable, or you can adapt, learn the new rules, find your own kind of power. I don't feel very powerful right now. Nobody does at first. But you survived a massacre, survived the desert, survived finding out your daddy sold you like cattle." Sarah's smile was thin. "That's more strength than most people manage. Don't waste it on pride." She walked away before Lillian could respond, leaving her alone with the wind and her tangled thoughts. The week passed too quickly and too slowly. Lillian worked in the boarding house, learning the rhythm of frontier life, laundry that never seemed to end, cooking for rough men who barely looked at her, scrubbing floors until her hands cracked and bled. It was humbling, exhausting, strangely honest. She saw Caleb twice. Once, when he stopped by to check if she'd made a decision, she hadn't, and once when he brought in a drunk cowboy who'd tried to shoot up the saloon. Both times he was professional, distant, giving her space. Both times she caught herself watching him, trying to figure out what kind of man would agree to this arrangement, what he got out of it beyond solving a debt problem. On the 6th day, Mrs. Chen cornered her in the kitchen. "You gonna marry the sheriff or not?" Direct. No room for evasion. "I don't know," Lillian admitted. "What's to know? He's offering you safety, stability, respect. You think you'll find better out here? It's not about better, it's about—" She struggled for words. "It's wrong. Marriage should be about love, or at least choice." Mrs. Chen snorted. "Love? You know how I got married? My parents arranged it when I was 14, shipped me across an ocean to a man I'd never met. You think I had a choice? That's different. It's not. Marriage is a contract. Always has been. The love part. If it comes, good. If not, you build a life anyway." She fixed Lillian with a sharp look. "You're not special, girl. We've all had to survive. Question is whether you're smart enough to take the help when it's offered." That night, Lillian lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Everyone kept telling her to be practical, to adapt, to accept the new rules. But accepting felt like giving up, like admitting that her father had won, even in death, that she really was just property to be traded. Except, and this was the thought that kept her awake, refusing didn't change anything. The debt existed, the contract existed, her father's betrayal existed whether she acknowledged it or not. Saying no to Caleb didn't make her free. It just made her broke and vulnerable with winter coming and nowhere else to go. The next morning, Lillian walked to the sheriff's office before she could talk herself out of it. Caleb looked up when she entered, something guarded in his expression. "I'll do it," she said before courage failed her. "The marriage. I'll agree to the contract." He didn't smile or show relief, just nodded once. "All right. I'll make arrangements. We can do it tomorrow if you want to get it over with." Tomorrow. The word felt surreal. That fast? No point dragging it out. He stood, moving to the filing cabinet. "There'll be paperwork. Judge Wilson will officiate. Won't be fancy." "I don't need fancy." "Good." He pulled out forms, setting them on the desk. "For what it's worth, Miss Pierce, I'll do right by you. Won't ask for anything you're not willing to give. This is business, and I treat my business fairly." Business? Not a marriage, not a partnership, just a transaction to solve mutual problems. Lillian should have felt relieved. Instead, she just felt numb. One condition, she heard herself say. Caleb looked up. What? 6 months. We stay married for 6 months to satisfy the contract, then we file for divorce. I want that in writing. He studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and started writing. 6 months, he agreed. After that, you're free to go wherever you want. Fair? It wasn't fair. None of this was fair, but it was the best deal she was going to get. Fair, Lillian said. They shook hands, her grip probably too tight, his warm and calloused, sealing a bargain that felt less like a marriage contract and more like a prison sentence with an end date. Tomorrow, she'd become Mrs. Caleb Vance. Tonight, she'd mourn the last shred of the life she'd thought she'd have. And after that? After that, she'd survive. Because apparently, that's all she was good at anymore. The wedding happened in Judge Wilson's cramped office with 2 witnesses Lillian had never met, and a ceremony that lasted exactly 4 minutes. No music, no flowers, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was. A legal maneuver dressed up in vows neither of them meant. Lillian wore the same borrowed dress she'd been wearing all week. Caleb wore his usual work clothes, badge still pinned to his vest like he might need to arrest someone mid-ceremony. When the judge asked if she took this man, Lillian's voice came out steady enough to surprise herself. I do. Caleb's response was quieter, almost reluctant. The judge pronounced them married, and that was it. No kiss, no celebration. Caleb signed the papers with the same expression he'd used signing a property deed, and Lillian did the same, her hand only shaking a little. Congratulations, Judge Wilson said, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what kind of marriage this was. Mrs. Vance? The name felt foreign, wrong. Outside, the sun was too bright, the street too normal. People went about their business like the world hadn't just tilted sideways. Like Lillian hadn't just legally bound herself to a stranger. I've got a house, Caleb said, breaking the awkward silence. Small, but it's got 2 bedrooms. You can have your own space. Of course. Because this wasn't a real marriage, and he wasn't expecting a real wife. Thank you, Lillian managed. They walked through town side by side, but not together, the gap between them speaking volumes. A few people called out congratulations. Sarah from the stable gave Lillian a knowing look. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly, but most just stared. The new Mrs. Vance. The Eastern woman who'd survived a massacre and somehow ended up married to their sheriff within a week. She could practically hear the gossip forming. Caleb's house sat at the edge of town, a simple wooden structure that had clearly been built for function over comfort. Inside was sparse, table, chairs, stove, a few dishes, the kind of place a man lived when he didn't expect company. Your room's upstairs, he said, gesturing. Left door. I'm on the right. There's a lock if you want it. The offer, the acknowledgement that she might need to lock him out, should have been reassuring. Instead, it just highlighted how little they knew each other. I'll be working most days, Caleb continued, moving through the space like he was giving a tour to a boarder, not a wife. Gone sometimes overnight if there's trouble. You're free to do whatever you want. Go into town, work if you choose, leave if you need to. I'm not keeping you prisoner. Just legally bound for 6 months. His jaw tightened. Yeah, that. Lillian climbed the stairs, found the room he'd mentioned. It was bare except for a bed and a dresser, but the window looked out over open land and it was clean. Private. She sat on the bed, springs creaking, and tried to process what she'd just done. Married. She was married. To a man who looked at her like an inconvenient responsibility. Downstairs, she heard Caleb moving around, then the front door opening and closing. Through the window, she watched him walk back toward town, shoulders set, stride purposeful. Already leaving. Already treating this like the business arrangement it was. Lillian lay back on the unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling, waiting to feel something other than numb. The first week of marriage was a study in avoidance. Caleb left early, came home late. When they were in the same room, he was polite, asked if she needed anything, made sure there was food, but distant. Like they were strangers sharing a boarding house, not a home. Lillian told herself she preferred it this way. No expectations. No complications. But the silence was suffocating. She spent her days exploring Iron Ridge, learning its rhythms. The town was rougher than anywhere she'd lived, but there was an honesty to it. People worked hard, spoke plainly, didn't pretend to be something they weren't. Mrs. Chen still had her working at the boarding house. Marriage doesn't change our deal, she'd said firmly, and Lillian was grateful for the routine. The work kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. It was Sarah who finally broke through Lillian's isolation. "You can't hide forever," she said one afternoon, finding Lillian sitting alone behind the stable. "People want to meet the sheriff's wife." "I'm not really his wife." "That piece of paper says different." Sarah sat down beside her, smelling like horses and leather. "Look, I know this isn't what you wanted, but you're here now. Might as well make the best of it." "How?" "By pretending everything's fine, by finding your place, building something that's yours." Sarah studied her. "What did you do back east, before everything went to hell?" Lillian thought about it. "Survived, mostly. My father's business failed years ago. I learned to make dresses, do bookkeeping, anything to keep us afloat. I was supposed to be a governess in California." "Can you read?" "Of course." "Write? Do numbers?" "Yes, why?" Sarah's smile was calculating. "Because half the people in this town can't, and the ones who can are too busy with their own work to help others. You could teach. Start a school, maybe." "A school?" The idea seemed absurd. "I'm not a teacher." "You're educated. That's more than most folks here. Their kids are growing up barely able to sign their names." Sarah stood, brushing dust from her pants. "Think about it. Better than hiding behind buildings feeling sorry for yourself." She walked away, leaving Lillian with the uncomfortable realization that she was right. That night, Lillian waited up for Caleb. He came home around 9, looking tired, and stopped short when he saw her at the table. "Something wrong?" he asked. "I want to start a school." He blinked. "What?" "A school, for the children here. Sarah said most of them can't read or write properly. I could teach them." Caleb took off his hat, running a hand through his hair. "That's actually not a bad idea. Town's been talking about needing a teacher for years, but nobody's stepped up. Would people trust me? I'm an outsider. You're the sheriff's wife now. That counts for something." He moved to the stove, checking the coffee pot. "Where would you hold it?" "I don't know. I haven't thought that far." "Church has space. Reverend Miller would probably let you use it if you asked." He poured coffee, offered her a cup. "You'd need supplies. Books, slates, chalk." "I don't have money for that." "I do. Some." He sat across from her the first time they'd shared the table for more than passing necessities. "It's a good idea, Lillian. Give you purpose here. Give the town something it needs." The use of her first name, the first time since the wedding, caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for supporting this." "Why wouldn't I? You're trying to do something useful. That's more than most people manage." They sat in silence, drinking coffee, and for the first time it didn't feel completely uncomfortable. Starting the school proved harder than Lillian expected. First, she had to convince the parents. Many were skeptical. Why should they send their kids to learn reading when there was work to be done? What good were books when you were trying to survive? "Because survival isn't enough," Lillian argued, standing in front of a skeptical crowd at the town meeting. "Your children deserve better than just getting by. They deserve opportunity, choice, the ability to build something more." "Big talk from someone who's been here 2 weeks," a rancher named Dutch called out. "What do you know about what our kids need?" "I know what it's like to watch your future disappear because you have no options," Lillian shot back, surprising herself with the heat in her voice. "I know what it feels like to be helpless, and I know that education is the one thing nobody can take from you." The room went quiet. "She's right," Mrs. Chen said from the back. "I came to this country with nothing. Couldn't speak English, couldn't read, had to learn everything the hard way. Our children shouldn't have to struggle like that." Others nodded. Slowly, reluctantly, the resistance cracked. By the end of the meeting, Lillian had 8 students committed. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Caleb helped her set up the church space, moving benches, building a makeshift desk from scrap lumber. He worked quietly, efficiently, and Lillian found herself watching him. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Really?" He looked up from hammering. "Because it's a good thing you're doing." "That's not an answer." Caleb set down the hammer, considering. "This town, It's hard. People come here because they're running from something or looking for something they can't find anywhere else. Most don't last. But the ones who do, the ones who build something real, they make this place better. And you think I can do that? I think you're trying. That's more than I expected. The honesty in his voice, the admission that he'd had low expectations, should have stung. Instead, it felt like a challenge. I'm not giving up, Lillian said, on the school or anything else. Good. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. This place could use more stubborn. The school opened on a Monday morning with 8 children ranging from 6 to 14, all looking at Lillian like she might explode. She'd prepared lessons on basic reading and arithmetic, simple things to assess where everyone stood. What she discovered was worse than she'd feared. Only 2 could write their names, and none could read more than a handful of words. But they were eager. That surprised her. Once the initial shyness wore off, they wanted to learn, ask questions, soaked up information like plants getting their first water. By the end of the first week, Lillian was exhausted but energized. This was working. She was making a difference. Then Tommy Brennan's father showed up. "You teaching my boy nonsense?" John Brennan demanded, storming into the church. He came home talking about Columbus and continents and I don't know what all. "I'm teaching him geography," Lillian said calmly, though her heart raced. "World history, basic knowledge. He don't need to know about the world. He needs to know how to work a ranch." "He can do both." "Can he? Because time spent reading your fancy books is time not spent learning real skills." Lillian felt her temper rise. Reading is a real skill. Math is a real skill. Your son deserves... Don't tell me what my son deserves. Brennan stepped closer, intimidating. "You're nobody. Some Eastern woman playing teacher because you got nothing better to do." "Mr. Brennan, you keep your ideas to yourself. Tommy's done with this school." He grabbed his son's arm, dragging the boy toward the door. Tommy looked back at Lillian, something like betrayal in his eyes, and she felt helpless rage building. "You're making a mistake," she called after them. Brennan didn't respond, just left, taking Tommy with him. That night, Lillian came home fighting tears of frustration. She thought she was doing something good. Instead, she was apparently threatening people's way of life. Caleb found her sitting at the table, staring at nothing. "Heard about Brennan," he said. "News travels fast." "Always does." He sat down. "He's an ass. Don't let him get to you." "Easy for you to say. You didn't just lose a student because you're trying to help." "No, but I've lost plenty of fights trying to do the right thing." Caleb leaned back. "People here are scared of change. Education feels like change. Like their kids might leave, might decide ranching isn't enough." "Would that be so terrible?" "To them, yeah." He studied her. "But you can't force people to see past their fear. You just keep doing good work, and eventually enough of them come around." "And if they don't? Then you tried anyway. That matters." Lillian looked at him, really looked, saw the weariness in his face, the weight of trying to maintain order in a place that barely recognized the concept. "Does it get easier?" she asked, being the one people blame for trying to help. "No." He stood, moving toward the stairs. "But you get tougher. Learn not to take it personal." He left her sitting there, and Lillian realized something surprising. She was starting to understand him. A month into the marriage, something shifted. They started talking. Not much. Just exchanges at meals, brief conversations about the town, the school, practical matters. But it was more than the cold silence of those first weeks. Lillian learned that Caleb had been a soldier before becoming sheriff, that he'd seen things he didn't talk about, that he'd come west looking for something quieter and found chaos instead. Caleb learned that Lillian could curse like a sailor when frustrated, that she was stubborn to the point of self-destruction, that she had a sharp wit hidden under layers of propriety she was slowly shedding. They weren't friends, weren't anything close to what married couples were supposed to be, but they were becoming something. Partners, maybe. People who occupied the same space without constant tension. Then came the fire. Lillian woke to shouting and the smell of smoke. She stumbled to the window and saw orange light glowing from the center of town. Caleb was already dressed, grabbing his gun belt. "Stay here," he ordered. "What's happening?" "Saloon's on fire, spreading fast." He headed for the door. "I can help." "Stay here!" The command was sharp, leaving no room for argument. He left, and Lillian stood at the window, watching flames climb into the night sky. Every instinct screamed at her to do something. Anything. Staying here felt like cowardice. She dressed quickly, ran toward the fire. The scene was chaos. Half the town formed a bucket brigade from the well, passing water that seemed pathetically inadequate against the blaze. The saloon was already lost. The priority now was stopping the fire from spreading to the general store and boarding house. "Get back!" someone yelled when they saw her. "This ain't safe!" Lillian ignored them, grabbing a bucket, joining the line. Her arms screamed after the first dozen passes. After 50, she couldn't feel them anymore. But she kept going because everyone else was, because stopping meant watching everything burn. Caleb appeared through the smoke, soot-covered and intense. "I told you to stay home!" "You don't get to order me around," Lillian shouted back, passing another bucket. "You could get hurt." "So could you. I'm helping whether you like it or not." They didn't have time to argue further. A beam crashed down from the saloon, sending sparks everywhere. People scattered, screaming. Lillian felt hands grab her, pulling her back. Caleb shielded her body with his as burning debris rained down, and for a moment they were pressed together, his heart hammering against her back. "You okay?" His voice was rough. "Fine. Let me go. We need to keep working." He released her, and they both dove back into the fight. It took hours. Dawn was breaking by the time they got the fire under control. The saloon reduced to smoking ruins, but the rest of town saved. People collapsed where they stood, exhausted and relieved. Lillian sat on the ground, hands blistered, dress ruined, hair singed. She'd never been more tired in her life. Caleb dropped down beside her, breathing hard. "You're stubborn as hell," he said. "You already knew that." "Yeah." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "You did good tonight. Saved lives, probably." The praise, coming from him, hit different than she expected. "So did you," she said quietly. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun rise over the wreckage. "Mrs. Vance!" Dutch, the rancher who'd questioned her school, approached. "Heard you were in the thick of it all night. That took guts." "I just did what everyone else did." "Not everyone. Some folks ran. You stayed." He nodded, something like respect in his eyes. "My daughter Emma, she's 7. Been thinking about that school of yours. If you're still taking students, I'd like to send her." Lillian's throat tightened. "I'm still taking students." "Good. She starts Monday." After he walked away, Caleb chuckled. "What?" Lillian asked. "You just earned more respect in one night than some people get in years here. By fighting a fire? By not running when things got hard? By proving you're not just some fragile Eastern lady?" He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, let's get you home." She took his hand, rough, strong, steady, and let him pull her up. Walking back through the damaged town, people called out thanks, nodded, acknowledged her in ways they hadn't before. Lillian Pierce had arrived as an outsider, a burden, a woman attached to a contract. But somewhere in the smoke and chaos, she'd become something else, part of Iron Ridge. The change wasn't immediate, but it was real. More students joined the school. Parents who'd been skeptical now made a point to thank her. Mrs. Chen started inviting her to women's gatherings, informal meetings where the town's female residents shared news, helped each other, built community. Lillian found herself settling in, making friends, building a life that felt less temporary. And her relationship with Caleb shifted again. They ate meals together now, talked about their days. He'd tell her about disputes he'd settled, problems brewing on the frontier. She'd share stories about her students, frustrations with limited supplies. One night, she found him struggling with paperwork at the kitchen table. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Monthly report for the territorial marshal. Numbers don't add up." He rubbed his eyes. "Never was good with accounting." "Let me see." She took the papers, scanned them, immediately spotted the errors, fixed them in 10 minutes. Caleb stared. "How did you do that so fast?" "I kept my father's books for years. This is simple compared to creative bankruptcy accounting." A smile, rare and genuine, crossed his face. "You're full of surprises, Lillian Vance." The name still felt strange, but less wrong than before. "So are you, Sheriff." They developed a routine. Caleb would bring home territorial paperwork, and Lillian would help organize it. In exchange, he'd help with school supplies, building shelves, fixing broken desks, handling the physical labor she couldn't manage alone. It was practical, efficient, and somewhere in the efficiency, they started becoming friends. 3 months into the marriage, they were sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the desert impossible colors. Can I ask you something? Lillian said. Go ahead. Why did you agree to my father's contract? Really? The debt alone doesn't explain it. Caleb was quiet for a long time. She thought he might not answer. I was married before, he finally said. Long time ago. She died, cholera outbreak during the war. We'd been married 6 months. Lillian's chest tightened. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. He stared at the horizon. After she died, I told myself I was done with that. Marriage, family, all of it. Too much risk, too much loss. So why agree to a marriage contract? Because it wasn't real. No emotions, no expectations, no chance of loss because there was nothing to lose. He glanced at her. It was safe. And now? The question hung between them. Now it's complicated, Caleb admitted. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone helpless, temporary, easy to keep at a distance. His mouth quirked. Turns out you're stubborn, competent, and harder to ignore than I planned. Lillian felt heat rise in her cheeks. I could say the same about you. Yeah? You're not just the cold, distant sheriff everyone sees. She struggled for words. You care. About this town, about doing things right. You just hide it behind practicality. Caring gets you hurt out here. Not caring makes you lonely. The truth of it sat heavy between them. 3 months left, Caleb said quietly. On the contract. I know. Still planning to leave when it's up? Lillian had been asking herself the same question for weeks. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I would. Thought I'd count down the days until I could escape. But now... Now? Now I have a school, friends, a purpose. She looked at him. I'm not sure what leaving would give me that I don't already have here. Something intense flashed in Caleb's eyes. You know you don't have to stay married to me to stay in Iron Ridge. We could divorce, and you could still teach, still live here. Is that what you want? I'm asking what you want. Lillian's heart hammered. This was dangerous territory, feelings creeping into what was supposed to be a simple arrangement. She paused. I want to see how this plays out. 3 more months, then we decide. Together? Together, Caleb nodded slowly. All right then. They sat in silence as night fell, close but not touching, the space between them charged with possibility and fear. The next morning, Lillian was teaching when Caleb appeared at the church door, expression grim. Need to talk to you, he said. The tone made her stomach drop. She dismissed the students early, followed him outside. What's wrong? The debt, he said. The one your father owed. I just got word from the collection agency. Lillian's blood went cold. What about it? It's been paid. In full. 2 weeks ago. The world tilted. What? By who? Anonymous payment. Cashier's check from a bank in San Francisco. Whoever paid it didn't want to be identified. Lillian sat down hard on the church steps, mind racing. That means the contract's fulfilled. Legally, you're free. Caleb's voice was carefully neutral. We can file for divorce anytime. No waiting period needed since the terms are met. Free. She was free. The word should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like vertigo. Do you know who paid it? She asked. No, could have been anyone. Maybe someone who owed your father a favor. Maybe a guilt payment from one of his business partners. Caleb sat beside her, not quite touching. Does it matter? I don't know. Maybe. Lillian pressed her hands to her face. I thought I had 3 more months to figure this out. You don't have to decide right now. Don't I? The whole reason we got married, it's gone. Why would we stay married? The question hung heavy. Caleb stared at his hands. Only reason I can think of is if we wanted to. Do you want to? I'm not going to pressure you, Lillian. You've had enough of your life decided by other people's contracts and debts. He stood. The choice is yours. Always should have been. He walked away, leaving her sitting on the church steps with freedom she didn't know how to use. That night, Lillian couldn't sleep. She paced her room, then the hallway, then ended up downstairs, making tea she didn't want. Caleb appeared in the doorway, also clearly unable to sleep. "Can't stop thinking either?" he asked. "No." She poured him tea without asking. "This should be simple. We got married to solve a problem. Problem solved. We should divorce. Should. But I keep thinking about what I'd lose." She sat at the table. "The school, the respect I've earned, my place here. You wouldn't lose those. People respect you for you, not because you're my wife." "Are you sure? Would they trust a divorced woman teaching their children?" "Some might have problems with it," Caleb admitted, "but you've proven yourself. That matters more." "And us?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. "What happens to whatever this is?" Caleb sat across from her. In the lamplight, his face was all shadows and angles. "What do you think this is?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. We're not in love, but we're not strangers anymore either." Lillian met his eyes. "We're friends, partners, something." "Something," he agreed. "More than I expected. Less than some marriages, but more than ours was supposed to be." "Is that enough?" "For what?" "To stay married." The question laid bare, no hiding behind practicality or contracts. Caleb reached across the table, covered her hand with his. The touch was warm, gentle, deliberate. "I don't want you to stay because you feel trapped," he said, "or because it's convenient. If you stay, it should be because you want to build something real. With me." Lillian's heart raced. "And if I don't know what I want yet? Then take time to figure it out. I'm not going anywhere." She looked at their hands, hers small and scarred from work, his large and calloused from years of hard living. Such different people thrown together by circumstance. But they'd built something despite that. Maybe because of it. "Can I ask you something honestly?" Lillian said. "Always." "If you could go back, knowing everything you know now, would you still have agreed to that contract?" Caleb didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Why?" "Because it brought you here. And whatever happens next, I'm grateful for that." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. "I need time," she whispered, "to think, to figure out what I want versus what I think I should want. Take all the time you need." He squeezed her hand once, then let go, heading back upstairs. Lillian sat alone in the kitchen, tea growing cold, mind spinning with impossible choices. She'd come to Iron Ridge expecting to die. Instead, she'd found a life, purpose, respect, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that looked like love. The question was whether she was brave enough to choose it, or if freedom meant walking away from the best thing she'd accidentally found. Lillian didn't make a decision that night, or the next, or the week after. She told herself she was thinking, weighing options, being rational. The truth was, she was scared. Scared of choosing wrong, scared of choosing right, and having it blow up in her face anyway. So she kept teaching, kept working, kept living in the strange limbo of a marriage that was real and not real at the same time. Caleb didn't push, didn't ask, just went about his business like nothing had changed, except sometimes she'd catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. 2 weeks after learning about the paid debt, Lillian was walking back from the school when she noticed the horse tied outside their house. Unfamiliar. Expensive saddle, well-groomed, not the kind of mount you saw often in Iron Ridge. She found Caleb in the kitchen with a stranger, a man in his 50s, well-dressed, holding himself like someone used to being important. "Lillian," Caleb said, tension in his voice. "This is Marcus Donnelly. He's a lawyer from San Francisco." The word lawyer made her stomach drop. "Mrs. Vance." Donnelly stood, offering a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A pleasure. I was just explaining to your husband that I represent certain financial interests back east." "What kind of interests?" Lillian asked, staying by the door. "The kind concerned with your late father's estate." He pulled papers from his briefcase. "I'm here to inform you that a substantial inheritance has been located. Your father had investments that recently matured, approximately $40,000. The number hit like a physical blow. "That's not possible," Lillian whispered. "My father died broke. He had debts, not investments. He had both. The investments were tied up in long-term bonds that he'd apparently forgotten about. They've now been liquidated, and after settling remaining creditors, the balance comes to you. Lillian sat down hard. $40,000. A fortune. Enough to live comfortably for years, enough to go anywhere, do anything. There's a condition, Donnelly continued. The money can only be claimed in person at our San Francisco office. You'd need to travel there, sign the appropriate documents, establish banking arrangements. How long would that take? Caleb asked, voice carefully neutral. A week, perhaps 2, depending on Mrs. Vance's travel arrangements and how quickly we can process everything. Lillian looked at Caleb. His face was unreadable, but something in his eyes looked like resignation. I need to think about this, she said. Donnelly frowned. Mrs. Vance, this is a significant sum. Most people don't need to think about claiming their inheritance. I'm not most people. She stood. Thank you for coming all this way, Mr. Donnelly. I'll send word about my decision. Time is somewhat of the essence. The funds are in escrow and there are legal deadlines. How long do I have? 30 days from today. Then I'll have an answer before then. Donnelly clearly wanted to argue, but something in her tone stopped him. He gathered his papers, gave Caleb a look that suggested he should talk sense into his wife, and left. The silence after he was gone felt crushing. $40,000, Caleb finally said. That's life-changing money. I know. You could go back east, start over somewhere civilized. Never have to work in a kitchen or fight fires or teach in a dusty church again. I know that too. He turned to face her. Then why do you look like someone just sentenced you to death? Because I don't know what I want. The words came out louder than intended. A month ago, I thought I knew. I was trapped here, counting days until I could leave. Now I have money, freedom, choices, and I'm terrified of all of them. What are you afraid of? Making the wrong choice, leaving and regretting it, staying and resenting it. I don't know, Caleb. I don't know anything anymore. He crossed the room, stopping close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. You want my honest opinion? He asked. Yes. Go to San Francisco, claim the money. See what that life looks like now that you can actually afford it. His jaw tightened. And if you decide to come back after that, then you'll know it's because you want to, not because you have no other option. The suggestion felt like a knife to the chest. You want me to leave? I want you to choose freely. Can't do that while you're here, wondering what else is out there. And us? There is no us if you're only here because you're stuck. He stepped back, putting distance between them again. We'll still be married when you go. Still will be when you come back. If you come back. Nothing has to be decided right now. What if I don't come back? Pain flickered across his face, quickly hidden. Then I'll file the divorce papers and wish you well. He left her standing in the kitchen, and Lillian wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. She'd finally started building something real, and now she had to choose between security and the unknown, between a life she was learning to love and possibilities she'd never imagined. That night, she talked to Mrs. Chen. You're an idiot if you don't go, the older woman said bluntly. Take the money, see San Francisco, come back or don't, but at least you'll know. What if I lose everything here? What if you gain everything out there? Mrs. Chen poured tea. I came to this country with nothing, built a life through hard work and luck. But if someone had offered me $40,000 and a chance to explore, I'd have taken it. Life's too short to wonder what if. Sarah's advice was similar but more colorful. Don't be stupid. Go see what money can buy you. If it's better than what you've got here, great. If not, you come back knowing you chose this dusty hellhole with your eyes open. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. You're the one making it complicated. Sarah fixed her with a knowing look. You're scared you might actually prefer the fancy life, that you'll realize this was all just making the best of a bad situation. That's not... Or maybe you're scared you won't prefer it, that you'll go to San Francisco and realize you'd rather be here, married to a grumpy sheriff, teaching kids in a church. And that'll mean you actually care about him, which is terrifying because caring means risking loss. Lillian stared at her. I hate that you're right. Everyone hates it when I'm right. Doesn't make me wrong. The decision crystallized over the next few days. Sarah and Mrs. Chen were right. She needed to go. Not just for the money, but to know. To see what life looked like when she actually had choices. She told Caleb over breakfast, "I'm going to San Francisco." He looked up from his coffee, face carefully blank. "When?" "Stage leaves Tuesday. I'll need maybe 2 weeks there, then travel back." "You coming back?" "I don't know, but I'll send word either way. You deserve to know." Caleb nodded slowly. "I'll talk to Mrs. Chen about watching the house. Make sure everything's secure while you're gone. The school? Sarah can cover. She's been helping anyway, and the kids like her." They were being so practical, so careful, dancing around the real question neither wanted to ask. Finally, Caleb set down his cup. "Lillian, if you decide to stay in San Francisco, build a life there, I won't hold it against you. Won't make you feel guilty. You've earned the right to choose what you want. And if I come back, then we'll figure it out. Together." The word together carried weight neither of them acknowledged. Tuesday came too fast. Lillian packed light, just clothes and a few personal items. Everything else could stay. Would stay, whether she came back or not. The whole town turned out to see her off. Her students gave her drawings and flowers. Mrs. Chen pressed coins into her hand for emergencies. Sarah hugged her hard. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do," she said, "which leaves you a lot of room." Caleb waited by the stagecoach, holding her bag. In the daylight, she could see new lines around his eyes, tension in his shoulders. "Safe travels," he said, voice formal. "Caleb, don't." He shook his head. "Don't make promises or declarations. Just go. See what's out there. I'll be here when you get back, if you get back." Lillian wanted to say something meaningful, something that would capture the confused tangle of emotions she couldn't name. Instead, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Quick, chaste, nothing romantic. But his hand came up to steady her waist, and for a heartbeat, they were close enough that she could feel his breath hitch. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Then she climbed into the stagecoach before courage failed her, and the driver snapped the reins, and Iron Ridge grew smaller in the window until it was just dust and memory. San Francisco was overwhelming. The noise, the crowds, the sheer density of humanity pressed together in streets that actually had proper pavement. Lillian had forgotten what civilization looked like, how it smelled, not just dust and horses, but garbage and industry and salt from the bay. The lawyer's office was impressive. Marcus Donnelly greeted her professionally, walked her through paperwork that took 3 days to complete. The money was real. $40,000 transferred to an account in her name. "What will you do with it?" Donnelly asked as they finalized the last documents. "I don't know yet." "You could invest. Buy property. There are opportunities in this city for someone with capital." "I'll think about it." She left with a bank book that proved she was wealthy, and the knowledge felt surreal. Lillian spent a week exploring the city. Stayed in a nice hotel, not luxury, but clean and comfortable with actual indoor plumbing. Ate in restaurants where the food came on real china. Walked through shops selling dresses that cost more than she used to spend on food for a month. She could afford all of it now, could buy a house here. Start a school with proper supplies and paid teachers. Live comfortably without ever scrubbing floors or hauling laundry again. The thought should have been appealing. Instead, she felt restless. Disconnected. She wrote to Caleb once, a brief letter saying she'd arrived safely and the inheritance was real. His response came a week later, equally brief. School was doing well, town was quiet. Sarah sent her regards. Nothing personal, nothing that revealed what he was thinking or feeling. Lillian told herself that was fine. Professional distance. Smart. It felt awful. On her 12th day in San Francisco, she was sitting in a cafe when a woman at the next table struck up conversation. "You look lost," the woman said. "New to the city?" "Visiting. I live in the territories." "By choice?" The woman's tone suggested she couldn't imagine why anyone would choose that. "It's complicated." They talked for an hour. The woman, Catherine, was a widow, well off, connected to San Francisco society. She invited Lillian to a social gathering that evening, and Lillian accepted partly out of curiosity, partly out of loneliness. The party was everything she'd once dreamed of. Educated people discussing books and politics, music, wine, conversation that went beyond survival and weather. And Lillian was bored out of her mind. "You seem distant," Catherine said, finding her by a window. "Not enjoying yourself?" "It's lovely. Everyone's been very kind." "But?"
But it feels hollow, like everyone's playing roles instead of living. Catherine laughed. That's an astute observation. Most people don't notice until they've been here years. She studied Lillian. What do you do? Out in the territories? I teach. Run a small school for children who otherwise wouldn't get an education. How noble.
The word stung because it was dismissive, like teaching was charity work instead of real work. It's not noble, Lillian said. It's necessary. Those kids deserve a future, and I'm helping build it. And that's enough for you, living in primitive conditions, working yourself to death for children who aren't even yours? The question was meant to be insulting. Instead, it clarified everything. Yes, Lillian said. It's enough, more than enough. She left the party early, walked back to her hotel, and sat down to write a letter. Not to Caleb, to herself. She listed everything San Francisco offered: money, comfort, culture, safety, opportunity. Then she listed what Iron Ridge offered: purpose, community, respect she'd earned, students who needed her, a life she'd built with her own hands, and Caleb. She wrote his name last, stared at it for a long time. Caleb Vance, a man who'd saved her life, married her out of obligation, and somehow become the person she most wanted to talk to at the end of each day, who challenged her, respected her, saw her as an equal when the whole world wanted to see her as less, who'd given her freedom to choose even though it might mean losing her. Lillian folded the letter, tucked it away, and made her decision. The next morning, she went back to Donnelly's office. I need to make arrangements, she said. I'm transferring most of the inheritance to a trust. A trust? For what purpose? Education. Building a proper school in Iron Ridge, paying teachers, buying supplies and books, creating something lasting. Donnelly frowned. Mrs. Vance, that's very generous, but have you considered? I've considered everything. This is what I want. She left enough for herself to live comfortably. Not wealthy, but secure. The rest went into the trust, legally binding, funds to be dispersed for educational purposes in Iron Ridge and surrounding territories. It took 3 days to finalize. When it was done, Lillian bought a ticket on the next stage heading east. She was going home. The journey back felt longer than the trip out. Every mile, Lillian questioned her choice. Was she being stupid, throwing away security for sentiment? What if she got back and Caleb had changed his mind? What if the town didn't want her anymore? What if she'd built everything up in her head and reality couldn't match it? The stage stopped overnight at a way station, and Lillian couldn't sleep. She sat outside, staring at stars that looked impossibly bright in the desert darkness. Can't sleep either? She jumped. A man sat nearby, older, weathered. One of the other passengers. Too much thinking, Lillian said. Going home or leaving it? Going home, I think. You think? I left to see if I'd miss it. Turns out I did. A lot. The man chuckled. That's usually how it works. We don't know what we have until we're stupid enough to walk away from it. Did you walk away from something? Wife. 20 years ago. Thought I needed adventure, freedom. All that nonsense young men think they need. He stared at the stars. Found out freedom just means being alone. And adventure stops being fun when you got nobody to share it with. Did you go back? Tried. She'd moved on, remarried. Can't blame her. I was the one who left. He looked at Lillian. Don't make my mistake. If you got someone worth going back to, don't wait. Don't assume they'll just be there whenever you're ready. The words haunted her the rest of the trip. Iron Ridge appeared on the horizon 3 days later, and Lillian's heart hammered. The town looked smaller than she remembered, rougher, but also more real than anything she'd seen in San Francisco. The stage stopped, and Lillian climbed down on shaky legs. People noticed immediately. Mrs. Chen appeared from the boarding house, eyes sharp. You're back. I'm back? For good? If you'll have me. A smile cracked Mrs. Chen's weathered face. Damn fool girl. Of course we'll have you. Sarah emerged from the stable, saw Lillian, and let out a whoop. You came back. Does the sheriff know? Not yet. He's at the office. Go, now, before I die from suspense. Lillian walked through town, bag in hand, aware of people stopping to stare. Whispers followed her. The sheriff's wife, back from the city. Did she stay or just come to collect her things? The sheriff's office door was open. Lillian paused outside, suddenly terrified. What if he didn't want her back? What if he'd realized during her absence that life was easier without a complicated wife who couldn't make up her mind? You planning to stand there all day, or are you coming in? Caleb's voice, dry and familiar. Lillian stepped inside. He sat behind his desk, hat pushed back, looking exactly like she remembered. Maybe a little more tired, maybe a little more tense. You're back, he said, and she couldn't read his tone. I'm back. For good or just visiting? That depends. On? Lillian set down her bag. On whether you still want a wife who's stubborn, opinionated, and apparently can't appreciate civilization even when it's handed to her on a silver platter. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Depends on whether that wife still wants a husband who's emotionally closed off, workaholic, and lives in the middle of nowhere. I think she does, Lillian said softly. I think she went all the way to San Francisco to figure out that everything she actually wanted was right here. Caleb stood slowly, came around the desk, stopped close enough that she could see the hope he was trying to hide. Everything? He asked. The school, the town, the life I built. She met his eyes. And you. Especially you. Lillian, I know this is complicated. I know we started as a business arrangement, and we're probably both terrified of what it's becoming. But I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of protecting myself from something that might actually be good. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to stay married. Really married. Not because of contracts or debts or convenience, but because I choose you. Choose us. Her voice shook. If you'll have me. Caleb closed the remaining distance, hands coming up to frame her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, nothing like the rough efficiency she'd expected. I've been half alive since you left, he said roughly. Told myself I was fine, that I'd be fine if you didn't come back. But I wasn't. This place felt empty without you in it. Caleb. He kissed her, and it wasn't practiced or smooth. It was desperate and clumsy and perfect. Lillian grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer, kissing back with everything she'd been holding in for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Please stay. I'm not going anywhere, Lillian promised. Not anymore. They stood there, wrapped in each other, until footsteps on the porch made them jump apart. Sarah stood in the doorway, grinning like a fool. Took you too long enough. The whole town's been making bets on whether you'd finally figure it out. Get out, Caleb said, but there was no heat in it. Not until I know. Are we celebrating or consoling? Celebrating, Lillian said, unable to stop smiling. Definitely celebrating. Thank the stars, Mrs. Chen's gonna be insufferable about being right. Sarah winked. Welcome home, Mrs. Vance, for real this time. She left, and Lillian turned back to Caleb, who was watching her with an expression that made her chest ache. I brought something back, she said. Besides myself. Yeah? She told him about the trust, the money set aside for education, the plans to build a real school, hire teachers, create something lasting. Caleb listened, expression shifting from surprise to something deeper. You gave up a fortune, he said quietly, for this town. I invested a fortune in this town's future. There's a difference. Lillian, that money could have set you up for life anywhere in the country. It is setting me up for life, here, where I want to be. She took his hands. I'm not some martyr making a sacrifice. I'm being selfish. I want a real school, want to teach without worrying about supplies. Want to build something that'll last after I'm gone. This isn't charity, it's ambition. Pride flickered across his face. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm practical, and apparently in love with a stubborn sheriff, which might actually make me crazy. The word love hung between them, raw and new. Say that again, Caleb said. Which part? The love part. Lillian's heart raced. I love you. I don't know when it happened, maybe during the fire, maybe earlier, maybe the moment you saved my life in the desert, but I do. Love you. Even though you're difficult and emotionally constipated and... He kissed her again, cutting off the litany. This time it was slower, deeper, full of promise.
"I love you too," he said against her lips. "Even though you're stubborn as hell and apparently incapable of choosing the easy path. We're quite a pair." "Yeah, we are." They were still standing there, grinning at each other like idiots, when the first gunshot cracked through the air. Caleb's entire body went rigid. He grabbed his rifle from the rack, moving to the window. "Stay here," he ordered. "What's happening?" More gunshots, screaming from the street.
"Sounds like trouble at the saloon." He checked the rifle's load. "I need to—" The door exploded inward. 3 men stormed in, guns drawn, and Lillian recognized the one in front from the desert. The massacre. The man who'd dragged her from the stagecoach. Dalton. "Well, well," he drawled, grin vicious behind his bandana. "The pretty lady lives, and got herself married to the man who killed my boys. How convenient." Caleb had his rifle up, but the other 2 men had guns pointed at Lillian.
"Let her go," Caleb said, voice deadly calm. "Your fight's with me." "Oh, but hurting you through her is so much more satisfying." Dalton moved closer to Lillian, and she forced herself not to flinch. "You cost me men, money, reputation, time to collect." "You'll have to go through me first," Caleb said. "That can be arranged." Everything happened at once. One of Dalton's men grabbed Lillian. She screamed, fought, but he was stronger. Caleb swung his rifle toward them, but the 3rd man fired first. The bullet caught Caleb in the shoulder, spinning him back. He hit the desk hard, blood spreading across his shirt. "No!" Lillian's scream was pure rage. She stopped fighting defensively and went on offense. Drove her elbow back into her captor's ribs, stomped on his foot, twisted away when his grip loosened. The man who'd shot Caleb turned his gun on her. Lillian saw it happening like it was slow motion. The gun rising, the finger on the trigger, her life about to end just when she'd finally figured out what she wanted. Then Caleb was moving, injured, bleeding, but fast. He tackled the gunmen and they went down in a tangle of limbs and violence. Dalton pulled his own gun, aiming at Caleb's exposed back. Lillian didn't think. Just grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy ledger from the desk, and threw it. It hit Dalton's arm, spoiling his aim. The shot went wide, punching through the window instead of Caleb's spine. "Bitch!" Dalton rounded on her, murder in his eyes. Caleb's gun, the one he kept on his desk, was right there. Lillian grabbed it, hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. Dalton laughed. "You even know how to use that? Point and pull the trigger, right?" She fired. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The shot went wide, hitting the wall behind Dalton. He stopped laughing, started advancing. Lillian fired again, closer this time. "I've got 6 shots," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "Eventually I'll hit something important." Behind Dalton, Caleb had subdued his opponent, was reaching for his rifle with his good arm. The remaining gunman, the one who'd grabbed Lillian, made a choice. Ran, just turned and bolted out the door. Dalton looked between Lillian with the gun and Caleb retrieving his rifle, calculated odds, and came up short. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yeah, it is," Caleb said, rifle now trained on Dalton's chest. "Drop the gun. Now!" For a moment, Lillian thought he'd fight. Go out shooting. Then Dalton's gun clattered to the floor, and his hands went up. The next hour was chaos. Deputies arrived. Apparently Caleb had too. Lillian had never met. They hauled Dalton and his unconscious partner to the cells. A doctor came for Caleb's shoulder. "Bullet went through," the doc said, probing the wound while Caleb gritted his teeth. "You're lucky. Little to the right, and it would have hit something vital." "Don't feel lucky," Caleb ground out. Lillian sat beside him, still shaking, the gun she'd fired now evidence on the desk. "You did good," Caleb said when the doctor stepped away to prepare bandages. "I almost got you killed. You saved my life. Again." He reached for her hand with his good arm. "We're getting really bad at staying out of trouble." "Speak for yourself. I was fine in San Francisco." "Were you?" Despite everything, Lillian smiled. "No, I was miserable and bored and missing you every second." "Good." The doctor finished bandaging, gave strict orders about rest and not being a hero, and left. The deputies left too, taking the prisoners. Finally, it was just Lillian and Caleb in the wrecked office, surrounded by splintered wood and broken glass and the aftermath of violence. "I shot at a man,"
Lillian said quietly. Actually pulled the trigger, intending to hurt him. You defended yourself, defended me. That's not wrong. It doesn't feel right either. Caleb pulled her close with his good arm, and she let herself lean into him, careful of his injury. Welcome to the West, he said, where survival means doing hard things and living with it after. I hate it. Yeah, me too sometimes. They sat in silence, and Lillian realized something fundamental had shifted. She'd faced death twice now, in the desert and today. Both times she'd survived. Both times she'd chosen to fight rather than surrender. The refined Eastern lady she'd been 6 months ago wouldn't recognize the woman she'd become, and Lillian wasn't sure that was a bad thing. We should go home, Caleb said finally, before someone decides to shoot at us again. Is this normal? The getting shot at? More than I'd like, less than it used to be. That's not reassuring. Never said life with me would be safe, just said I'd do right by you. Lillian helped him stand, his weight heavy against her side. They walked through town together, and people stared at Caleb's blood-stained shirt, at Lillian's disheveled appearance, at the fact that they were clearly together in a way they hadn't been before. Let them stare, Lillian thought. Let them gossip. She'd chosen this life, this man, this violent, beautiful, impossible place, and she wasn't looking back. At home, she helped Caleb upstairs, got him settled in bed despite his protests that he was fine. You're not fine, you were shot. Flesh wound. Caleb, please, let me take care of you. He looked up at her, expression softening. All right, but only because you asked nice. Lillian brought water, helped him drink, checked his bandages the way the doctor had shown her. When she was satisfied he was comfortable, she started to leave. Stay, he said. I'm just going to... stay, here, with me. His good hand found hers. I know we haven't talked about the practical details, but I don't want you sleeping down the hall anymore. Want you here, if that's okay. Lillian's throat tightened. It's more than okay. She climbed into bed beside him, careful of his injury, and Caleb wrapped his good arm around her. Hell of a homecoming, he murmured. At least it wasn't boring. Is that what you want? Excitement? I want you. Boring or exciting, safe or dangerous, just you. He kissed the top of her head. You've got me, for as long as you want. Forever might be nice. Forever it is. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since that terrible day in the desert, Lillian felt completely, utterly safe. The nightmare came anyway. She woke gasping, Dalton's face vivid in her mind, the feeling of helplessness choking her. Hey, Caleb's voice rough with sleep but alert. You're safe. I'm right here. I can't stop seeing it. The gun. His eyes. I almost died today. But you didn't. You fought back. You survived. What if next time I don't? Then I'll make sure there's no next time. His arm tightened around her. I won't let anyone hurt you again. I promise. You can't promise that. Watch me. The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, should have felt like false comfort. Instead, it steadied her. Caleb Vance didn't make promises he couldn't keep. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. Love you too. Now sleep. We've got tomorrow to figure out. Tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days beyond. Lillian had come to Iron Ridge expecting to die. Instead, she'd found a reason to live, a purpose, a home, and a love she'd fight for with everything she had. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That was enough. Morning came with sunlight cutting through the curtains, and Caleb's shoulder throbbing like someone was driving nails into it. He shifted carefully, trying not to wake Lillian, but she stirred anyway. How bad? She asked, voice thick with sleep. I've had worse. That's not an answer. It hurts. I'll live. He sat up slowly, testing his range of motion. The bandage was clean, no bleeding through, which was good. Need to check on the prisoners. Make sure everything's secure. You need to rest. Can't. The town needs their sheriff alive, not bleeding out because he's too stubborn to take a day off. Lillian sat up beside him, hair a wild mess, eyes fierce. Your deputies can handle things for one day. You're staying in bed. Lillian, don't argue with me.
I just came back from San Francisco. I can leave again. Despite the pain, Caleb smiled. You're bluffing. Try me.
He studied her, this woman who'd been terrified in the desert 6 months ago, who now stared him down like she'd fight him if necessary. The transformation still caught him off guard sometimes. One day, he conceded, then I'm back to work. We'll see. She left to get breakfast, and Caleb lay back, staring at the ceiling. His shoulder hurt, but that wasn't what bothered him. What bothered him was how close they'd come to losing everything yesterday. How Dalton had walked right into his office, how Lillian had almost been taken again, how he'd been useless to stop it. The fear that had gripped him when that gun pointed at her, it was the same fear that had nearly destroyed him when his first wife died. The terror of loving someone and knowing you couldn't protect them from everything. He thought marrying Lillian as a business arrangement would keep him safe from that fear. Turned out loving her made him more vulnerable than ever. Downstairs he heard voices. Lillian's and someone else. Male. Familiar. Caleb got up despite his body's protests, pulled on a shirt one-handed, and headed down. Marcus Donnelly sat at their kitchen table, looking out of place in his expensive suit. Mr. Donnelly, Caleb said, voice cold. Didn't expect to see you back here. Sheriff, Donnelly stood. I heard about yesterday's incident. Wanted to ensure Mrs. Vance was unharmed. I'm fine, Lillian said, pouring coffee. Though I appreciate the concern. I also came to discuss the trust arrangements. There are papers that need signing, details to finalize. He glanced at Caleb. Perhaps we could speak privately? Anything you need to say to my wife, you can say in front of me, Caleb said. Donnelly's smile was thin. Of course. Though given your injury, perhaps you should be resting. I'm fine right here. The lawyer pulled documents from his case. The trust is established, but there are decisions to be made about distribution. How much per year goes to building costs versus teacher salaries? What qualifications teachers need to meet? Whether funds can be used for secondary education or just primary? I trust Lillian to make those choices, Caleb interrupted. It's her money, her project. Actually, Sheriff, as her husband, you have legal authority over... I'm not interested in legal authority. If Lillian wants my input, she'll ask. Otherwise, this is her decision. Donnelly looked between them, clearly not understanding. In his world, husbands controlled their wives' finances. That's how things worked. That's very progressive of you, he said carefully. It's called respecting my wife, Caleb said flatly. Maybe try it sometime. After Donnelly left, papers signed, arrangements made, Lillian turned to Caleb. You didn't have to do that. Do what? Back me up like that. Some men would have wanted control of that much money. I'm not some men. He accepted the coffee she handed him. Besides, you're smarter about this stuff than I am. Town's lucky to have you investing in it. We're investing in it. This is our home. Our home. The word settled something in Caleb's chest. Yeah, he said. It is. The next week was a strange mix of recovery and normalcy. Caleb's shoulder healed slowly, and he was a terrible patient, constantly trying to do more than the doctor allowed, growling when Lillian forced him to rest. You're worse than the children, she said one afternoon, catching him trying to saddle his horse one-handed. I need to check the northern boundary. There's been reports that your deputies can handle. Get back in the house. Lillian, now, or I'm telling Sarah you're being difficult, and she'll sit on you if she has to. Caleb knew when he was beaten. You're enjoying this too much. A little bit, yes. But beneath the bickering, something deeper was settling between them. They were learning each other's rhythms, how Caleb got quiet when he was worried, how Lillian paced when she was thinking, small intimacies that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with actually knowing another person. One evening, Lillian found Caleb on the porch, staring at nothing. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing. Caleb, he sighed. Just thinking about Dalton. He's got a trial coming up in 2 weeks. Territorial judge is writing in to handle it. That's good, right? Justice? If he's convicted, yeah. But trials out here are unpredictable. He might walk. And if he does? Then he'll come after us again. He's that kind of man. Won't let a grudge go. Lillian sat beside him. So what do? We live. Can't spend our lives waiting for threats that might never come. He looked at her.
I'm just sorry you got dragged into my mess. Your mess? He attacked the stagecoach before I even met you. This was always both our mess. Still, you could have had a safe life in San Francisco. Safe and miserable. She took his hand. I'd rather be here, in danger with you. That probably makes me crazy. Makes us both crazy.
They sat in silence, watching the sunset, and Caleb realized he wouldn't trade her, for anything. The school construction started 3 weeks later. What had been just a church space transformed as workers arrived. Carpenters from Santa Fe, materials hauled in by wagon. Lillian oversaw everything, arguing with contractors about proper ventilation, insisting on large windows for natural light, making sure there was space for a real library. You're building a palace, Caleb said, watching her review plans. I'm building something that'll last. These kids deserve better than rough benches in a church. The town watched the construction with mixed reactions. Some were excited. Their children would have real opportunities. Others were suspicious, worried about what education might change. They'll leave, Dutch said one evening in the saloon. You teach kids to read fancy books, they'll want fancy lives. Won't be satisfied ranching or working trades. Maybe, Caleb said. Or maybe they'll use that education to build better ranches, better businesses. Make this whole territory stronger. You really believe that? I believe Lillian does, and she's usually right about this stuff. Dutch snorted. You got it bad, Sheriff. Yeah, Caleb admitted. I do. The trial came on a Wednesday, and the whole town turned out. Dalton sat in chains, looking smug despite the evidence against him. His lawyer, brought in from somewhere back east, was good, Caleb had to admit. Spun a story about misunderstanding, about Dalton just trying to recover stolen property, about the stagecoach shooting being carried out by men he couldn't control. My client is a businessman, the lawyer argued, not a murderer. The prosecutor presented witnesses, survivors from other raids, evidence of the criminal network Dalton ran, and then they called Lillian. She walked to the stand with her head high, wearing one of her simple dresses, looking like she belonged in a schoolroom, not a courtroom. The prosecutor asked her to describe the massacre. Lillian did, voice steady, recounting details that made people in the gallery gasp. Dalton's lawyer tried to shake her on cross-examination. Mrs. Vance, you were under extreme stress during this incident, correct? Yes. Traumatized, frightened, perhaps not thinking clearly? I was terrified, but I remember everything perfectly. You claim my client attempted to abduct you, but isn't it possible you misunderstood his intentions? Lillian's eyes went cold. He said, and I quote, "Boss might pay extra for this one." What part of that suggests good intentions? Perhaps he meant to help you by killing everyone else first? That's an interesting definition of help. The gallery laughed. The judge banged his gavel. I was there, Lillian continued, voice hard. I watched people die. I ran for my life. And that man, she pointed at Dalton, would have sold me like cattle if he'd caught me. Don't you dare suggest I misunderstood. The lawyer had no response to that. When Lillian stepped down, she met Caleb's eyes across the courtroom. He nodded, pride clear on his face. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Dalton would hang within the month. Outside the courthouse, Lillian's hands shook as the reality hit. A man's going to die partly because of my testimony, she said. A man's going to die because he murdered innocent people, Caleb corrected. You just told the truth. Doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. That night, Lillian couldn't sleep again. She kept seeing Dalton's face when the verdict was read. No remorse, just cold calculation. He'll die hating us, she whispered in the darkness. Probably, Caleb said, but he can't hurt us anymore. You don't know that. I know the law's got him. That's the best we can hope for out here. Lillian turned to face him. Do you ever regret it? This life? All the violence and danger? Caleb thought about it. Sometimes. But then I think about the alternative. Walking away. Leaving this place to tear itself apart. Couldn't live with that. What about me? Do you ever regret marrying me? Not once. He pulled her closer. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. Maybe ever. Even with all the complications?
especially with the complications. They make it real. Lillian kissed him, soft and slow, and for a while the darkness didn't seem so heavy. The school opened officially in September, just as the summer heat started breaking. 23 students on the first day, nearly double what Lillian had started with. The new building smelled like fresh wood and paint. Sunlight streamed through the large windows. Shelves lined one wall, slowly filling with books ordered from back east. Lillian stood at the front of the classroom, looking at faces both familiar and new, and felt something close to awe. "Welcome," she said, "to the first day of the rest of your education." Emma, Dutch's daughter, raised her hand. "What's that mean?" "It means this is just the beginning. What you learn here, you'll carry with you forever. It'll open doors, create opportunities, let you build whatever life you choose." "Even if we want to stay here?" Tommy Brennan asked. His father had eventually relented, let him come back to school. "Especially if you want to stay here. Education isn't about leaving, it's about choosing. Knowing enough to decide what you want, then having the skills to achieve it." She started the lesson, basic reading for the younger ones, more advanced work for the older students. By lunchtime, her voice was hoarse and her feet hurt, but she'd never felt more alive. Caleb appeared at lunch with sandwiches Mrs. Chen had sent. "How's it going?" he asked. "Perfectly, terribly. I have no idea what I'm doing half the time." "Looks like you're doing fine to me." 3 of the older boys can barely read. 2 of the girls are way ahead of everyone else and getting bored. And I'm pretty sure half of them are only here because their parents forced them. Give it time. They'll come around. Lillian ate her sandwich, watching the children play outside. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not a good enough teacher? You overthink things. Caleb stood. You care about these kids. That's more than half the battle. The rest you'll figure out. He was right, of course. Over the following weeks, Lillian found her rhythm. Learned to challenge the advanced students while supporting the struggling ones. Discovered which kids responded to encouragement and which needed firm boundaries. It wasn't perfect. She made mistakes, pushed too hard sometimes, not hard enough others. But the kids were learning, growing, and that made every frustration worth it. 3 months into the school year, Mrs. Chen approached Lillian with a proposition. I'm getting old, she said bluntly. Need help running the boarding house. You interested? In what? Working there again? In buying it. I'm ready to retire, and I'd rather sell to someone I trust than some stranger who'll run it into the ground. Lillian stared. I can't afford... You've got that trust fund. Use some of it. This would be a good investment. Steady income. Serves the community. Mrs. Chen's expression softened, and it'd keep me from having to leave. I could stay in my rooms upstairs, help when needed, but not carry the burden anymore. I need to talk to Caleb. Of course. But think about it. You're good with people, good with business. This town's growing. We'll need more rooms, more services. Could be a real opportunity. That night, Lillian presented the idea to Caleb. What do you think? She asked. I think you should do it if you want to. That's not helpful. What do you want me to say? It's your money, your decision. I want your opinion, as my husband, not just as someone being respectful of my independence. Caleb set down the report he'd been reading. All right, honest opinion? I think you'd be good at it. You already run the school, help me with paperwork, manage our household. Adding the boarding house would be a lot, but you're capable of handling it. But I worry you'll burn yourself out. You already work too hard, says the man who tried to patrol with a bullet wound. Exactly. I know what overwork looks like, and I don't want that for you. Lillian considered. What if I hired help? Used some of the trust money to pay Mrs. Chen to stay on part-time, brought in another woman to handle the heavy work? Then it's more manageable. He pulled her down beside him. Look, I'll support whatever you decide. Just promise you'll be honest if it gets to be too much. Promise. She bought the boarding house the following week. The transaction was simple. Mrs. Chen had kept excellent records, the price was fair, and within days, Lillian owned her second major property in Iron Ridge. You're becoming a businesswoman, Sarah said, impressed. Next, you'll be running the whole town. I just want to build something lasting, something that'll be here long after I'm gone. Noble, also exhausting. Sarah studied her. You happy? The question caught Lillian off guard. Was she happy?
6 months ago, she would have said happiness was impossible. She'd been traumatized, trapped, married to a stranger in a hostile land. Now? Yeah, she said, surprised by how true it felt. I actually am. Winter came hard that year. Snow buried the town for weeks at a time. The school had to close twice when temperatures dropped too low for the children to safely walk there. The boarding house stayed full, travelers trapped by weather, workers waiting out storms. Lillian ran herself ragged, keeping everything functioning, teaching when she could, managing the boarding house, helping Caleb with increased paperwork as winter brought its own troubles. She was exhausted, but she was also thriving. One evening in late January, Caleb found her asleep at the kitchen table, account books spread around her. Lillian, he shook her shoulder gently. Come to bed. Can't. Need to finish these. They'll keep until tomorrow. But, bed. Now. He pulled her up, guided her upstairs. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow. When she woke the next morning, the account books were finished. Caleb's handwriting filled in the remaining columns. Everything balanced perfectly. She found him in the kitchen, making coffee. You stayed up finishing my work, she said. You needed sleep more than I needed to patrol in a blizzard. Seemed like a fair trade. Lillian wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressed her face to his back. Thank you. We're partners. That's what partners do. Partners. Not just married, not just living together, actually working together, supporting each other, building something bigger than either of them alone. I love you, Lillian said. Love you too. Even when you're too stubborn to ask for help. I'm working on that. I know, so am I. Spring brought new challenges. The territorial governor announced plans to visit Iron Ridge, part of a tour assessing which towns deserved investment and official incorporation. It was a huge opportunity. Official town status meant legal protection, access to territorial funds, recognition that could attract more businesses and settlers. It also meant intense scrutiny. The town council, such as it was, met to prepare. We need to show progress, Mayor Wilson said. He was also the judge, the reverend, and ran the general store. Small towns required flexibility. Infrastructure, education, stability. We've got the school, Dutch pointed out. That's something? We've got a school and a sheriff's office that nearly got shot up 6 months ago, another councilman said. Not exactly a ringing endorsement of stability. That's been handled, Caleb said coldly. Dalton's dead. His gang's scattered. We haven't had a major incident since. Still, we need to present well. Show we're civilized. Lillian attended the meeting at Caleb's invitation. When talk turned to education, Wilson looked at her. Mrs. Vance, could you prepare a presentation? Show what the school's accomplished. Of course. And perhaps organize something cultural, a demonstration of student work, maybe a recital. I'll see what I can arrange. The next 3 weeks were frantic. Lillian worked with her students, preparing readings and mathematical demonstrations. The older kids worked on a written presentation about local history. The younger ones practiced songs. Meanwhile, the whole town scrambled to clean up. Buildings got fresh paint. The main street was graded and packed smooth. Someone even hung decorative bunting, though Caleb thought that was excessive. It's a governor, not royalty, he said. It's our future, Lillian countered. We need to impress him. The governor arrived on a Tuesday, traveling with 2 aides and looking thoroughly unimpressed by everything he saw. Small, he said, surveying the town. Growing, Mayor Wilson corrected. We've increased population by 30% in the last year. Infrastructure? We have a school, a functioning sheriff's office, a boarding house, several businesses. I can see what you have. What I want to know is what you're building toward. Lillian stepped forward, ignoring the surprised looks from some of the men. We're building sustainability, she said. Education that creates skilled workers, services that support both residents and travelers, a community strong enough to weather difficulties and smart enough to plan for growth. The governor studied her. And you are? Lillian Vance. I run the school and the boarding house. 2 businesses? Ambitious. Necessary. This town's too small for everyone to specialize. We all wear multiple hats. Show me this school. Lillian led him to the building, heart pounding. Everything depended on this going well. Inside, the students were ready. They performed beautifully, recited poetry, solved math problems on the board, presented their history report with confidence that made Lillian's chest swell with pride. The governor asked questions, hard ones. The older students fielded them competently. Afterward, he turned to Lillian. How are you funding this? Private investment, a trust established specifically for education in this region. Yours? Yes. And your husband, the sheriff, he supports this? Completely. The governor's expression was unreadable. Most men wouldn't allow their wives such independence. Most men aren't married to women capable of running successful institutions, Caleb said, appearing in the doorway. Sheriff Vance, we met earlier. Indeed. The governor looked between them. Interesting arrangement you have here. It works, Caleb said simply. That evening, the governor announced his assessment at a town meeting. Iron Ridge shows promise, he said. Strong leadership, both civic and educational, evidence of planning and community investment. I'm recommending you for provisional incorporation, with full status pending continued development over the next 18 months. The room erupted in cheers. Lillian grabbed Caleb's hand, squeezing hard. They'd done it. The town had a future. Her investment had paid off in ways she'd never imagined. Later, walking home under stars that looked close enough to touch, Caleb pulled her close. You were incredible today, he said. We all were. The whole town stepped up. But you led it. Your school, your vision, that's what impressed him. Our vision, Lillian corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you backing me. Still, this was your win. Lillian stopped walking, turned to face him. Do you ever regret how we started? The contract, the forced marriage, all of it? Caleb considered the question seriously. Sometimes I regret how it happened, but I never regret where it led us. Even with all the complications? Especially with those, they made us stronger. He cupped her face gently. You made me stronger, made me believe in things I'd given up on. Like what? Like building instead of just maintaining, like partnership instead of isolation, like love being worth the risk. Lillian kissed him, soft and deep, and when they broke apart, she was smiling. Let's go home, she said. Yeah, let's go home. They walked the rest of the way hand in hand, and Lillian thought about how far she'd come. From a terrified woman running through the desert to someone building a legacy. From a contract bride to a real wife with a real marriage. From surviving to actually living. The path hadn't been smooth. There'd been violence, fear, doubt, and moments when giving up seemed easier than pushing forward. But she'd chosen to push forward, every time. And that choice, that stubborn refusal to break, had given her everything. A purpose, a community, a love worth fighting for. As they reached their house, Caleb paused at the door. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For coming back. From San Francisco. You could have stayed, could have had an easier life. But you chose this, chose us. Best decision I ever made, Lillian said honestly. Even on the hard days. There will be more hard days. I know, we'll handle them together. They went inside, shutting out the cold night, and Lillian felt a certainty settle deep in her bones. This was home. This man, this town, this life she'd built from nothing. Whatever came next, they'd face it as partners. And that was enough. More than enough, as it turned out. Spring turned to summer, and Iron Ridge kept growing. 3 new families arrived, settlers drawn by word of the school, the stability, the promise of something better than just scraping by. The boarding house ran at capacity most weeks. Lillian hired 2 women to help manage it, freeing her time to focus on teaching. The school expanded too. Lillian brought in a second teacher, a young woman named Catherine from Denver who'd responded to an advertisement Lillian had placed in territorial papers. Together, they could handle nearly 40 students, separating them by age and skill level. You're building an empire, Sarah said one afternoon, watching Lillian organize supply orders. I'm building sustainability. There's a difference. Is there? You've got the school, the boarding house, half the town's finances running through your account books. Pretty soon you'll be mayor. I don't want to be mayor. I just want things to work properly. Sarah laughed. That's exactly what mayors say, but there was truth in it. Lillian had become central to Iron Ridge in ways she'd never intended. People came to her for advice, about business, about their children's education, about disputes that needed mediating. She'd become a leader without meaning to, simply by caring enough to make things better. Caleb noticed the shift too. "You've got more influence than I do these days," he said one evening. "That's not true." "It is. People respect the badge, but they trust you. That's more powerful." Lillian set down the letter she'd been writing to a publisher back east, requesting more advanced textbooks. "Does that bother you?" "Why would it? Some men don't like their wives being more influential than they are." Caleb pulled her onto his lap, ignoring her protest. "I'm not some men. Your success doesn't diminish mine. If anything, it makes this whole town stronger, which makes my job easier." "You're sure?" "Lillian, I watched you stand up to the territorial governor. I've seen you build something from nothing. Why would I be threatened by that?" He kissed her neck. "I'm proud of you. That's different from threatened." "I love you," she said, for maybe the 100th time since they'd stopped pretending this was just a business arrangement. "Love you too, even when you're running the whole territory behind my back. I'm not yet. Give it time." 2 years into their marriage, a real marriage now, no contracts or conditions, Lillian discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks but hadn't been sure. When the doctor confirmed it, she sat in his office feeling a complex mix of terror and joy. A baby. She was going to have a baby. In Iron Ridge. In the middle of nowhere, miles from proper medical care. In a life that was still rough and dangerous despite all the progress they'd made. "You look pale," Dr. Harrison said. "This is good news, isn't it?" "Yes, I think so. I don't know." Lillian pressed her hands to her stomach. "What if something goes wrong?" "Then we handle it. I've delivered plenty of babies out here, Mrs. Vance. Most turn out just fine." "Most isn't all." "No," he admitted, "but worrying won't change the outcome. You're healthy, strong, you've got good odds." Lillian walked home in a daze, trying to figure out how to tell Caleb. He was on the porch, cleaning his rifle. A weekly ritual that he claimed was practical, but Lillian suspected was actually meditative. "You're back early," he said, looking up. Then he saw her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think it is." She sat beside him. "I'm pregnant." The rifle nearly slipped from his hands. "You're... what?" "Pregnant. About 3 months along, the doctor thinks." Caleb set the rifle down carefully like he didn't trust his grip anymore. "We're having a baby." "Yes." "A baby." He repeated it like he was trying to make the words make sense. "Are you okay? You look like you might pass out." "I might." He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't think... we never talked about..." "I know. Neither did I." Lillian took his hand. "Are you angry?" "Angry? No. Terrified, maybe, but not angry." He looked at her, and she saw fear mixed with wonder in his eyes. "A baby. Our baby. You sure you're okay with this?" Caleb pulled her close, careful like she might break. "I lost a child once. My first wife was pregnant when she died. We never got to meet him or her." Lillian's throat tightened. "You never told me that." "Didn't want to think about it. But now..." His hand moved to her stomach, hesitant. "Now I'm scared it'll happen again, that I'll lose you both." "You won't. You can't promise that." "No. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay alive. And so will this baby." She covered his hand with hers. "We're survivors, Caleb. Both of us. This baby will be too." He kissed her forehead, and she felt him shaking slightly. "We're having a baby," he whispered again, and this time it sounded like a prayer. The pregnancy changed things. People treated Lillian differently, more carefully, like she was fragile. She hated it. She was pregnant, not dying. But Dr. Harrison insisted she reduce her workload, and Caleb backed him up with the kind of stubborn protectiveness that was both sweet and infuriating. "I can still teach," she argued. "No one said you couldn't, but maybe let Catherine handle the younger kids while you focus on the older ones, less running around. I'm not an invalid. You're carrying our child, humor me." She did, though it grated. Cut back her hours at the boarding house, let Mrs. Chen and the other women handle more of the daily operations. Focused on teaching the advanced students, preparing them for potential higher education, something that was still rare in the territories but becoming more possible. One of those students was Emma, Dutch's daughter. At 11, she was already reading at a level that would have impressed students twice her age.
"What do you want to do when you're grown?" Lillian asked her one afternoon. Emma considered. "I want to be a doctor." "That's ambitious. I like it." "Papa says women can't be doctors." "Your papa's wrong. Women can be doctors. It's harder, and you'll face people who'll try to stop you, but it's possible." Lillian pulled out a medical journal she'd ordered. "Start learning now. Read everything you can. When you're ready, we'll find you a way to get proper training." Emma's eyes went wide. "You really think I could?" "I think if you want it badly enough and work hard enough, you can do anything. That's what education is for, opening doors people say are closed." Later, Dutch approached Lillian after class. "Heard you're encouraging Emma to be a doctor," he said. Lillian braced for a fight. "I am. She's got the mind for it." "She does." He looked uncomfortable. "I've been wrong about a lot of things, Mrs. Vance. About education, about what girls can do. About you, honestly." "Oh?" "Thought you were just some fancy Eastern lady playing at being useful. But you've proven me wrong. This school, what you're doing for these kids, it matters." He shifted his weight. "Emma talks about you like you hung the moon, says you're the smartest person she knows." Lillian's eyes stung. "She's a remarkable student." "She's remarkable because of you, so thank you for seeing potential in her that I was too stubborn to see." After he left, Lillian sat at her desk and cried. Hormones and exhaustion and the overwhelming weight of responsibility. She was shaping young lives. What if she got it wrong? What if she pushed them toward dreams that would only break their hearts? Caleb found her there, red-eyed and hiccuping. "What happened?" "Dutch thanked me for teaching Emma." "That's good, right?" "It's terrifying. These kids trust me. They believe what I tell them about their potential. What if I'm setting them up for disappointment?" Caleb knelt beside her chair. "You're giving them tools and confidence. What they do with that is up to them. But at least they'll have the choice. That's more than most kids out here get." "What if I'm doing this all wrong?" "You're not. You're doing it imperfectly, which is how everything good gets done." He wiped her tears with his thumb. "You're tired and pregnant and trying to save the world one student at a time. Give yourself some grace." Grace. Such a simple concept, so hard to apply to herself. But she tried. The baby came in late November during the first real snowstorm of the season. Lillian's water broke at 3 in the morning, and she woke Caleb with a calmness that surprised herself. "It's time." He was up instantly, moving with the kind of controlled panic that would have been funny if she wasn't already starting to feel contractions. Dr. Harrison arrived within an hour, along with Mrs. Chen and Sarah. They set up in the bedroom and Caleb was banished downstairs. "This isn't fair," he protested. "She's my wife. And this is women's work," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You'll just be in the way. Go boil water or something useful." Labor lasted 14 hours. Lillian had known it would hurt. She'd prepared herself mentally, read what she could about the process. But knowing and experiencing were entirely different things. It hurt like nothing she'd ever imagined, like being torn apart from the inside. She screamed, swore, at one point told everyone to leave and never come back. Mrs. Chen just held her hand. "Almost there. You're doing fine." "I'm dying." "You're not dying, you're giving birth. Feels the same sometimes, but it's different." Sarah wiped her forehead with a cool cloth. "You survived a desert massacre. You can survive this." The massacre was easier. Another contraction hit, and Lillian lost the ability to form words. When the baby finally came, a girl, small but healthy, with a full head of dark hair, Lillian was too exhausted to do anything but cry. Dr. Harrison cleaned the baby, wrapped her in soft cloth, and placed her in Lillian's arms. "You did it," he said. "She's perfect." Lillian looked down at the tiny face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth working like she was already arguing with the world, and felt something shift fundamentally in her chest. This was her daughter, hers and Caleb's, a whole person they'd made together. "Can someone get Caleb?" she whispered. "I want him to meet her." Caleb burst into the room like he'd been shot from a cannon. He looked terrified, relieved, and completely overwhelmed. Are you?" "We're fine. Come meet your daughter." He approached slowly,
like the baby might disappear if he moved too fast. When he saw her, his expression did something complicated. "She's so small," he breathed. "She'll grow." Lillian adjusted her arms. "Want to hold her?" "I don't know how to—" "Neither do I. We'll learn together." She transferred the baby carefully, and Caleb held her like she was made of glass. The baby squirmed, made a small noise of protest, then settled. "What should we name her?" Lillian asked. They'd discussed names, but never settled on one. It had felt too real, too final, like naming her would tempt fate. "Grace," Caleb said quietly, still staring at the baby. "You told me to give myself Grace. Maybe she can remind us both." Lillian's throat tightened. "Grace Vance, I like that." "Grace Vance," Caleb repeated. He looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you." "For what?" "For surviving. For her. For all of it." The first months with Grace were brutal. Lillian had thought she understood exhaustion. She'd worked herself to the bone building the school, managing the boarding house, keeping everything running. But that was nothing compared to the relentless demands of a newborn. Grace cried constantly, fed every 2 hours around the clock, refused to sleep for more than 40 minutes at a stretch. Lillian walked the floor with her, rocked her, sang to her, tried everything Dr. Harrison suggested. Nothing worked for long. "She hates me," Lillian said one night, delirious with exhaustion. "She doesn't hate you. She's just a baby." Caleb took Grace from her arms. "Go sleep. I've got her. You have to work tomorrow. So do you. We'll trade off. Go." Lillian collapsed into bed and was unconscious in seconds. She woke 4 hours later, the longest stretch of sleep she'd had in weeks, to find Caleb still up, walking the floor with Grace, murmuring to her in a low voice. "She finally settled," he said quietly. "Didn't want to put her down and risk waking her." Lillian's chest ached looking at them. This man who'd seemed so closed off when she first met him, now gentle and patient with their impossible daughter. "You're a good father," she said. "I'm terrified every second. That's not the same as good." "Being terrified means you care. That's exactly what good fathers do." Catherine took over most of the teaching while Lillian recovered. It was supposed to be temporary, but as weeks turned to months, Lillian realized she didn't want to go back full-time. She loved teaching, loved watching students grow and learn, but she also loved being with Grace, watching her change daily, being present for the small miracles of development. "I'm thinking about stepping back," she told Caleb one evening, "focusing on administration and advanced students, but letting Catherine handle day-to-day teaching. Is that what you want?" "I think so. I built the school, proved it could work, but I don't have to run everything myself forever, do I?" "No, you're allowed to choose what makes you happy." "What if people think I'm abandoning my responsibilities?" "Let them think it. You've done more for this town than anyone. You've earned the right to prioritize your family." It felt like permission Lillian hadn't known she needed. She restructured her role, kept oversight of the school's finances and curriculum, taught the oldest students 3 days a week, but delegated the rest. It freed time for Grace, for managing the boarding house at a more sustainable pace, for actually sleeping occasionally. The town kept growing. By the time Grace was 2, Iron Ridge had nearly 200 residents. Official incorporation came through, bringing territorial funding for road improvements and a new town hall. There was talk of bringing in a telegraph line within the next few years. "We're becoming civilized," Sarah said, not entirely approvingly. "Won't be long before this place is just like everywhere else." "Is that so bad?" Lillian asked. "Depends. I like when things are rough enough that the weak don't stick around. Keeps it interesting." "You're terrible." "I'm honest. There's a difference." But even Sarah had to admit the changes were mostly positive. More families meant more stability, more businesses meant more opportunities. And the school, Lillian's school, had become a point of pride for the entire region. Students came from neighboring towns to attend. Some boarded with families in Iron Ridge, paying fees that helped support the school. 3 of Lillian's former students had gone on to higher education, 1 to a women's college in Boston, 2 to technical schools in Denver. Emma was preparing to leave for medical training in San Francisco. She was 16 now, confident and brilliant, everything Lillian had hoped she'd become. "I'm scared," Emma admitted the week before her departure. "Of what?" "Failing. Not being good enough. Proving everyone right who said I couldn't do this. Lillian recognized that fear intimately. She'd felt it in the desert, in the courtroom, every time she'd stepped into something unknown and terrifying. You will fail sometimes, she said honestly. You'll make mistakes, face people who want you to give up, have moments when you wonder if they were right. But Emma, failure isn't the end. It's just information about what doesn't work. What matters is whether you keep going anyway. Did you ever want to give up when things got hard here? Every day at first, I was terrified, completely out of my depth, convinced I'd made the worst decision of my life. Lillian smiled, but I kept showing up, kept trying, and eventually the terrified days became fewer. The good days became more common, not because it got easier, but because I got stronger. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, it's just necessary. You want to be a doctor? Then you show up, do the work, and refuse to quit even when it's awful. That's the only formula that works. Emma left the following week with 2 trunks full of books, a letter of recommendation from Dr. Harrison, and enough determination to power a small city. Watching her go, Lillian felt pride so intense it was almost painful. This was why she'd stayed, why she'd fought to build something lasting. Grace was 5 when Lillian realized she was pregnant again. She'd thought they were done. One child felt like enough, especially with everything else they were managing. But apparently life had other plans. This pregnancy was easier. She knew what to expect, had less to prove. Let herself rest when she needed to, accepted help more readily. The baby, a boy this time, came quickly. 4 hours of labor, and then Samuel Caleb Vance was screaming his way into the world. He's got your stubbornness, Caleb said, watching the baby fight being swaddled. That's definitely from you, Lillian countered. We're both stubborn. Poor kid never had a chance. Grace was fascinated by her baby brother, wanted to hold him constantly, help feed him, tell him elaborate stories he couldn't possibly understand. You're going to be a good big sister, Lillian told her. I'm going to teach him everything, like you taught me, and she did. As Samuel grew, Grace appointed herself his primary educator. By the time he was 3, she'd taught him numbers and letters, how to identify birds, basic astronomy. She's you, Caleb said, watching Grace explain cloud formations to Samuel with impressive accuracy. Completely you. Is that good or bad? It's perfect, though I'm not sure the world's ready for another Lillian Vance. The years passed faster than Lillian expected. Grace turned 10, already talking about following Emma into medicine. Samuel was 7, more interested in how things worked mechanically, took apart everything he could reach, usually managing to put it back together. The school had 3 full-time teachers now, 60-some students, and a reputation that drew families from across the territory. The boarding house practically ran itself with the staff Lillian had trained. Iron Ridge had a telegraph office, regular stage service, 2 churches, and enough businesses that the main street had to be extended. The population had crossed 500. You built this, Caleb said one evening, watching the town from their porch. We built it. Together. I kept order. You created community. There's a difference. Lillian leaned against him, comfortable in the silence. They'd been married nearly 15 years. 15 years of building, fighting, growing, of turning a contract into something real and lasting. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't saved me that day? She asked. Sometimes. Usually when I want to torture myself. I'd be dead. Everything we built wouldn't exist. Or someone else would have built it. The town wanted to grow. You just gave it direction. No, I mean us, our family, Grace and Samuel. None of that would exist. Caleb pulled her closer. Then I'm grateful every day I decided to investigate that gunfire. Most important decision I ever made, even though I didn't know it at the time. Your most important decision was agreeing to that contract. That was just paperwork, deciding to actually love you, to let myself be vulnerable again. That was the real choice. The scary one. Lillian turned to face him. Gray had started appearing in his hair, lines deepening around his eyes. He looked older, tired, but also content in a way the younger Caleb Vance never had. I love you, she said. Still. Always. Still and always, he agreed. The territorial governor, different from the one who'd visited years ago, came through again when Grace was 12. He'd heard about Iron Ridge's school, wanted to see what all the attention was about. Lillian gave him a tour, introduced him to students, showed him their work. "Remarkable," he said. "We're considering establishing territorial teaching standards. Would you be willing to serve on the committee developing them?" It meant traveling to the territorial capital quarterly, helping shape education policy for the entire region. A huge responsibility, a huge opportunity. "Can I think about it?" Lillian asked. "Of course, but we'd be honored to have your expertise." That night, she discussed it with Caleb and the children. "It would mean I'd be gone a week at a time, 4 times a year," she explained. "You should do it," Grace said immediately. "Think how many schools you could help." "But I'd miss time with you." "Mama, you're always telling me to take opportunities. You should take this one." Samuel nodded agreement. "We'll be okay. Papa's here. And we're not babies anymore." Caleb said nothing, just watched her wrestle with the decision. "What do you think?" she finally asked him. "I think you've spent 15 years building something incredible here, and now you have a chance to help build it everywhere else. That's worth a few weeks of travel." "You're sure?" "I'm sure you need to decide for yourself. But if you're asking whether I support it, absolutely." She accepted the appointment. Over the next 3 years, Lillian helped develop teaching standards, curriculum guidelines, and certification requirements that shaped education across the territory. It was exhausting, frustrating, politically complicated work. It was also some of the most important work she'd ever done. Schools in tiny settlements started using textbooks she'd recommended. Teachers in remote areas received training based on methods she'd helped develop. Children who otherwise would have grown up illiterate got access to real education. "You're changing lives you'll never meet," Catherine said. "That must feel incredible." "Mostly it feels overwhelming, like I'm making decisions that affect thousands of people, and what if I get it wrong?" "Then you'll adjust and try again. That's what you always do." Emma returned from medical school when Grace was 15. Dr. Emma Brennan now, the first female physician in the territory. She set up practice in Iron Ridge, and Lillian felt pride so fierce it was almost painful. "I wouldn't be here without you," Emma said. "You know that, right? You did the work. I just believed in you." That's more than anyone else did. Sometimes belief is everything. Watching Emma treat patients, Lillian thought about the scared girl who'd asked if women could really be doctors. About how a single conversation, a little encouragement, had changed the trajectory of a life. That's what education did. It didn't just teach facts, it opened possibilities, showed people they could be more than circumstance dictated. She'd learned that herself surviving in the desert, and she'd spent nearly 2 decades proving it to others. Grace left for college when she was 17, heading to the same women's college in Boston that one of Lillian's first students had attended. The day they put her on the stage, Lillian cried harder than when Grace was born. "She'll be fine," Caleb said, arm around Lillian's shoulders. "I know. That's not why I'm crying." "Then why?" "Because she's everything I hoped she'd be. Strong, smart, confident. She's going to do incredible things." She learned from the best. She learned from both of us. Samuel stayed local, apprenticing with the mechanic who'd set up shop in town. He was good with his hands, patient with complex problems, and genuinely happy working with machines. "You're not disappointed?" he asked Lillian. "That I'm not going to college?" "Why would I be disappointed? You found something you love that uses your talents. That's the whole point of education, helping you figure out who you are and what you want to do. Grace is going to be important. Change the world, probably. And you'll keep the world running while she's changing it. That's just as important." With both children grown, Lillian and Caleb faced the strange reality of an empty house. "What do we do now?" Lillian asked. "Whatever we want." That's the terrifying part. They traveled for the first time, took a trip to San Francisco, staying in a hotel far nicer than Lillian had afforded during her first visit. Saw the ocean, ate in restaurants, walked through museums. "This is what you could have had," Caleb said, watching well-dressed people stroll through galleries. "If you'd stayed all those years ago." "No. This is what I'd have been surrounded by. That's different from having it." She took his hand. "What I have is you, our children, a legacy that'll outlast both of us. That's worth more than fancy dinners." "Even with all the hardship? All the times you were scared or exhausted or ready to give up?" "Especially because of those. Easy lives don't build character, they just keep you comfortable." She smiled. I'm glad I chose the hard path. It made me who I am. They returned to Iron Ridge after 2 weeks, and Lillian realized the trip had confirmed something she already knew. This was home. Not because she was trapped here, but because she'd chosen it. Every day, through every challenge, she'd chosen it. And that choice had made all the difference. Lillian was 63 when Caleb had a stroke. He survived. Dr. Emma and a specialist brought in from Denver worked frantically to save him, but he was weakened. His right side didn't work properly anymore. He had to step down as sheriff, handing the badge to a younger man who'd trained under him. "I'm useless now," he said bitterly one afternoon, struggling to button his shirt with one hand. "You're alive. That's not useless. I can't do anything, can't work, can't even dress myself properly. So I'll help you dress."
"We'll adapt." Lillian took over the buttons. "You think after everything we've been through, I'm going to love you less because you need help now? You shouldn't have to, Caleb Vance, shut up. She finished the last button, looked him in the eye. "You carried me when I couldn't walk, protected me when I couldn't protect myself, believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You think I'm not going to return the favor?" His eyes were wet. "I'm scared." "I know. Me too. But we'll figure it out, like we always do." They did figure it out, though it was hard. Caleb had to relearn basic tasks, accept limitations that frustrated him daily. Lillian adjusted their life to accommodate his needs, all while continuing to serve on educational committees and advise the school. Some days were awful, days when Caleb was angry at his body's betrayal, when Lillian was exhausted from caregiving, when they snapped at each other over nothing. But there were good days, too. Quiet mornings on the porch, visits from Grace, now a doctor herself working in Denver, letters from Samuel, who'd opened his own machine shop and was doing well. "We built something good," Caleb said one evening, watching the sunset paint the desert impossible colors. "We did. The school's still going strong. The town's thriving. Our kids turned out better than we had any right to expect. That's because they had you as a father. They had you as a mother. That's the part that made the difference." Lillian leaned her head on his good shoulder. "We made the difference together. That's how it works." Emma brought news one spring morning. The territory was applying for statehood. Within a year, maybe 2, they'd be part of the United States proper, not just a frontier territory. "Everything's changing," she said. "Railroads coming through, more settlers every week. Iron Ridge might actually become a real city." "It's already real," Lillian said. "It's just becoming bigger." After Emma left, Lillian walked through town, seeing it with fresh eyes. The school had expanded again, now had a second building for advanced students. The boarding house had been renovated, modernized. Main Street was paved, lined with electric street lamps that had gone in the previous year. So different from the rough collection of buildings she'd first seen. Terrified and traumatized, wondering how she'd possibly survive. She'd not only survived, she'd thrived. Built something that would outlast her. That evening, she wrote letters to former students, dozens of them now, scattered across the country. Teachers, doctors, lawyers, business owners, people who'd started with nothing and made something of themselves. Each letter said the same thing. "Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. Watching you grow has been the greatest privilege of my life." The responses came back over the following months. Stories of success, of challenges overcome, of lives well lived. And in every one, some variation of, "I wouldn't be here without you. You changed my life." "Look at this," Lillian showed Caleb. "All these people we helped. You helped. I just kept the town from burning down. You gave them safety, stability, a place where they could actually learn and grow. That matters just as much as what I did." Caleb took her hand, his good one, still strong despite everything. "We made a good team. The best team." "Still are." "Still are," Lillian agreed. She was 72 when the invitation came. The new state university wanted to honor her contributions to education. A special ceremony, a plaque, recognition for her decades of work. Grace and Samuel both insisted on attending. Emma closed her practice for the day to come. Half the town made the trip. Standing on stage, looking at faces young and old, Lillian felt the weight of years settle comfortably on her shoulders. "I didn't set out to change anything," she said in her speech. "I just wanted to survive. But survival, I learned, isn't enough. We're meant to build, to create.
to leave things better than we found them. She talked about arriving in Iron Ridge, broken, terrified, with nothing. About finding purpose in teaching. About students who'd become teachers, doctors, leaders in their own right. I'm just one person, she said, but one person who refuses to give up can change the trajectory of an entire community. That's not special to me. That's available to anyone willing to do the work. To show up. To believe in possibilities even when everything seems impossible. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, former students lined up to thank her, to share their stories, to introduce their own children. "This is your legacy," Grace whispered. "All these lives you touched." Lillian looked at her daughter, brilliant, accomplished, everything she'd dreamed, and felt complete. "No," she said. "You're my legacy. You and your brother. These students are just proof that belief and hard work matter. But you two, you're the proof that love matters more." That night, back in Iron Ridge, Lillian and Caleb sat on their porch like they had thousands of times before. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked. Lillian thought about it honestly, about the hardships, the fear, the moments when giving up seemed easier than continuing. "No," she said finally. "Not one. Every hard thing led somewhere good. Every choice, even the ones that felt impossible, brought me here. To this life, this family, this legacy. Even the contract, the forced marriage, especially that, because it brought me you." She squeezed his hand, "and taught me that sometimes the things we think are traps are actually doorways. We just have to be brave enough to walk through them." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I love you, Lillian Vance. Have since the moment you told off that lawyer in our kitchen. Will love you until I stop breathing." "I love you too. Even when you're grumpy about needing help. Even when you're impossible. We're quite a pair." "We are. The best kind of pair. Imperfect, stubborn, but committed to showing up for each other no matter what." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the vast desert sky. The same sky that had witnessed Lillian's terror all those years ago. The same sky that had seen her build something from nothing. She'd been tested by fate, that was true. Thrown into impossible circumstances, forced to make brutal choices, asked to survive things that should have destroyed her. But she hadn't just survived, she'd chosen. Every day, every moment, she'd chosen to keep going, chosen to build instead of break. Chosen love over fear, possibility over limitation, hope over despair. And those choices, hundreds of tiny decisions to not give up, had created a life beyond anything she'd imagined when she first stumbled into Iron Ridge, traumatized and alone. The woman who'd been dragged from a burning stagecoach had become a builder, a teacher, a wife and mother. A leader who changed an entire region's approach to education, not because she was special, but because she refused to stay broken. That was the lesson, Lillian realized, the one she'd been teaching without fully understanding it herself. Life breaks everyone eventually. Loss, hardship, circumstances beyond control. They batter us all. The question isn't whether we'll be tested. The question is what we do afterward. Do we stay broken, become bitter, give up on the possibility of better? Or do we rebuild, adapt, find purpose in the pain and use it to create something meaningful? Lillian had chosen to rebuild, and in doing so, had shown hundreds of others that they could do the same. That was legacy. Not plaques or ceremonies, but lives changed, possibilities opened, hope restored in people who'd lost it. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked. "Everything, nothing. How lucky I am." "Lucky? You've worked harder than anyone I know." "Lucky that I had the chance to work, that I didn't die in that desert, that you saved me, married me, loved me." She looked at him. "None of this was guaranteed, but here we are anyway." "Here we are," he agreed. "Still stubborn, still fighting, still together." "Still together," Lillian echoed. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The stars shone bright over Iron Ridge, over the school Lillian had built, over the lives she'd changed, over the family she'd created from nothing but determination and love. And somewhere in that vast desert darkness, the woman who'd once run for her life now sat in peace, knowing she'd done exactly what she was meant to do. She'd survived. She'd built. She'd loved. She'd chosen her destiny instead of letting it choose her. And that made all the difference.